Story 1.
My world shattered. I discovered shocking proof of my wife brazenly cheating on me in my own car. My name is Ron, and I've been happily married to Lily for 15 years. Our family is a huge source of happiness for me, and I can really feel how much my wife loves me. Our marriage has grown in a way that makes me very happy. We're parents to 2 fantastic daughters in their early teens. Both of us have steady jobs. I work at a security company, and Lily is a voice translator at a film studio. We're healthy and live in a beautiful house in a nice area of the city. Life is great, and I don't think it could be any better. After our younger daughter was born, Lily gained some weight. However, her beautiful blue eyes, which stand out more behind her glasses. She doesn't use contact lenses because they bother her eyes when she reads or does paperwork, make her even more attractive. I'm deeply in love with Lily, and I know she loves me just as much. We have 2 amazing daughters, a comfortable house, and we don't worry about money. Everything was perfect in my life. But then, something bad happened after 15 years of marriage that could change everything and ruin my once perfect and happy life. Lately, Lily began a routine of hanging out with her women colleagues at various bars every other Friday. They rotate among 3 or 4 places they like. She goes out these Fridays to chat and relax after work, as she often tells me. I'm okay with her going out by herself. I get home by 4:30 every day to look after our daughters. When she's out with her colleagues on those nights, I make dinner for the girls and help them with homework, which I really enjoy. She typically gets back by 8, and then we spend the whole weekend together doing fun family activities and eating out with our daughters on Saturday night. But in recent months, she's been getting home later, around 10, on these girls' nights, and I've noticed she's had a few drinks. I didn't bring it up because she's still the same affectionate wife she's always been. Every time she returns from those nights out, she has this special smile that makes me want to hug her. I understand that her time with friends is her way to unwind and forget about a tough work week. I convinced myself it was just harmless fun with her colleagues, even if she started coming home later than before. Then, a few weeks ago, on a Monday morning, I received an email from someone who signed it as a friend. I almost deleted the message without reading it, but I decided to give it a second thought. The email said they were at the Black Crow last Friday and saw Lily enjoying herself with a group, especially dancing with a man from her group. They attached a picture taken with their cell phone, asking me to examine it closely. This email had already planted doubts in my mind, and I feared what I might find out. Despite knowing Lily danced during these outings, the email mentioned male co-workers, something she never told me. I always thought it was only her female friends. Even though she could have been dancing with someone already at the Black Crow, not part of their group, a lump formed in my throat, and I started feeling uneasy about the whole situation. Despite my reservations, I opened the attachment. The moment the picture appeared, I noticed it wasn't perfectly centered, suggesting the photographer was cautious to avoid being seen. I observed my wife's co-workers, both male and female, sitting at a long table in the background. The picture was somewhat blurry, but I could still make out my wife on the right side of the dance floor. She wore her beige blouse with red flowers and green leaves along with matching brown slacks, the same outfit from her last girls' night out. So I deduced the picture was taken the previous Friday when she arrived home later than usual at 10:30, giving me a hug and her usual smile. In the photo, she was on the dance floor with a tall young man, embracing tightly with both arms around his neck. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. I couldn't recall ever dancing like that with Lily or any other girl in public. The man's lower body pressed tightly against her, and it seemed she could feel his hardness rubbing against her. He had to be aroused, as it's impossible not to be in that situation. Strangely, Lily didn't seem bothered. On the contrary, she appeared happy, pushing herself against him as they locked eyes. My wife, the mother of my daughters, was in the arms of a stranger, behaving provocatively in public. I couldn't believe what I saw. She wouldn't dance with me like that in public. Why was she letting a stranger act this way? Or was he truly a stranger? Doubt firmly took hold in my mind and grew fast beyond my control. Various scenarios of my wife with other men played out, making me feel sick. I rushed to the bathroom where I threw up my breakfast. Lily, my wife, was acting inappropriately in public. Was she having an affair? How could she do this to me and our 2 daughters? Many questions flooded my mind. Who was that man? Did they work together? How long had this been happening? Why was she involved with him? Update: for the next 30 minutes, I stayed in my office bathroom trying to clear my thoughts. Gradually, new emotions started emerging: disappointment, sadness, and anger, followed by a strong desire for revenge. A range of intense emotions took over me, creating a whirlwind of reactions. I felt the urge to kick Lily, to hug her and ask her to stop, or even to consider divorcing her. Then, a moment later, I'd think of forgiving her and giving her another chance. As I sat on the toilet, I thought I was losing my mind. Eventually, I regained control. deciding to do nothing but wait and watch Lily before taking any action. Making emotionally influenced decisions without knowing the full truth wouldn't make sense. I needed to wait and not tell her about what I already knew. Simultaneously, I was determined to get to the bottom of it all. One way or another, I had to get solid proof of what was going on. Was she cheating on me, or was she just having exaggerated fun? However, I already knew she had lied by omitting the whole truth about her evenings out with the girls. Her movie studio was only a couple of blocks away from my workplace. Since I was often on the road for work, checking on Lily was easy. The next day at 11:30, I parked at the end of her workplace's parking lot, feeling relatively safe with tinted windows. I watched the exit door until 1, but she never came out. I repeated this for the rest of the week, and on Friday at 12:15, I saw Lily and 3 others, a woman and 2 men, get into a black BMW. Lily sat in front, next to the driver, and they drove away. Naturally, I followed them. They drove downtown, entered the parking lot of a fancy restaurant, and I observed them laughing as they went inside. Parked in front of the restaurant, I stayed in my car until they came out at 2. Lily walked next to the tall, light-haired man, the driver, the same man she had been dancing with in the photo I already had. She seemed very cheerful and excited, touching his arms as they talked. This, more than anything else, angered me. They drove back to her workplace and all went inside. So far, Lily hadn't done anything wrong except for not mentioning to me that she sometimes went out to eat with both male and female co-workers. More importantly, the 4 of them at lunch acted as if they were 2 couples, not friends or co-workers. And that bothered me the most. That Friday, Lily didn't go out with the girls after work and got home at 5:15, cheerful and smiling as usual. It took a lot of willpower to control myself and not bombard her with questions. However, I asked her once, while quietly sitting in front of the television after supper, if she had a good day at work. And then I inquired about her lunch. For a few seconds, I noticed she didn't know exactly what to say, but soon enough, she told me she ate the tuna sandwich she had prepared before leaving for work in the morning. Calling her a liar and maybe a cheater, I told myself. Lily was looking at me with those big blue eyes that I love so much as she told that blatant lie. Although my anger was building, I still felt an urge to reach out and hug her. Of course, being in love with someone does that. I knew I had to control myself or risk doing something I might regret afterward. Instead of asking her more questions, I decided to change the subject and talk about my day at work, trying to act as I usually did. That weekend, Lily probably didn't realize we were facing a significant issue. Later that night, we were close twice, and she behaved like the affectionate wife she always had been. On Saturday, we took our daughters to the zoo, had a great family time, and for a brief moment, I forgot about the events of the past week. I didn't bother checking on her at noon for the rest of the week because I intended to follow her on Friday evening after work. On that Friday, when my 2 daughters arrived home at 4:15, I was already there waiting for them. After ordering pizza, I explained that I had to go to the office and would be home later in the evening. They were old enough to take care of themselves, and it didn't bother me to leave them alone in the house as long as they locked the door. I knew they would be in their room by the time I returned. At exactly 5, I got into my car and drove to Lily's workplace. I observed her getting into her car, and as she left the parking lot, she turned away from our home, heading to a pub for her evening out with the girls. I had no trouble following her, as there was a convoy of 6 cars between my SUV and her Toyota, all driving in the same direction towards a pub, watering hole, or a dance hall, whatever you want to call it. 10 minutes later, I saw Lily's Toyota and the other 6 cars entering the parking lot next to a combination bar restaurant called the Glass Shoe. I stayed in my car, parked at the other end. When everyone was inside, I got out and walked around the place to learn more about where she was going. The pub was relatively distant from other buildings, surrounded by parking spaces. 2 sides bordered streets, and the other 2 were defined by a well-trimmed 5ft high cedar hedge, in front of which were parking spaces. I noticed the black BMW from the convoy, which Lily had gotten into for the restaurant the previous Friday. It was now parked separately in front of the cedar hedge, away from the other cars. I observed separate sets of doors, one for the restaurant and another for the bar. There were fire doors at the back for both, but those were for emergencies only. Another entrance on the other side, where most cars were parked, also led to the bar. However, Lily's group had entered through the door for the restaurant part of the building. I returned to my car and began changing into clothes I had brought for the occasion. I wore a baseball cap and a black windbreaker. Then I added a pair of glasses to my disguise. To change my facial features somewhat, I inserted a protective denture into my mouth, similar to those worn by boxers. I knew I would have a hard time talking and drinking with this, but I didn't care since it was not my intention to get into a discussion or get drunk. Looking in the rear-view mirror, I knew that no one would recognize me. I waited another hour in my car before entering the bar. The group, including my wife, was seated together near the dance floor, drinking and having fun. Seeing Lily sitting close to the same guy she had gone to eat with the previous Friday saddened and disappointed me. I suspected that something might be going on between them. I picked a table at the back, far from them, to quietly observe. The section where I sat was dimmer. There were a couple of lonely souls like me drowning their sorrows. I knew no one would pay attention to me there. Soon the music started, and people moved to the dance floor. I noticed Lily dancing with the guy who sat next to her. The other 3 guys at their table had weird smiles, watching them dance. It was clear Lily and that guy were a couple, catching everyone's attention. After a couple of hours, only Lily, another girl, and 2 men remained. The rest had left. Both couples were on the dance floor, and my wife had her arms around the guy. It was evident they were lovers. He had his hands on Lily's waist, and they barely moved on the dance floor, just standing and rubbing against each other. Then I saw him kiss her and say something in her ear. I watched her nod, and they left the building holding hands. I followed them. It was already quite dark outside. I saw them walk hand in hand to his car, parked in the last row of the parking lot near the cedar hedge. He knew they wouldn't be bothered there, with no other cars nearby and the hedge at the back. What were they planning? How far would Lily let it go? I needed to find out. Carefully, I walked to the other end of the parking lot and then toward the cedar hedge. Staying close to the 5 feet high hedge, I walked toward their car, hiding behind parked cars. Soon, I stood by the back of his BMW. At first, I saw no one inside due to the darkness. As I moved closer, attempting to look inside, the deeply tinted windows revealed nothing, but I heard muffled voices. Feeling desperate, I debated whether to intervene or wait to catch Lily in the act. After a brief moment, the decision was no longer mine. When I noticed the car shaking rhythmically, the guy was fooling around with my wife. I couldn't contain my rage. I yanked the door open, flooding the car with light, revealing my wife, Lily, lying on her back with her lover on top of her, caught red-handed. Having removed my disguise, Lily's eyes met mine, her expression shifting from bliss to shock in seconds. She mumbled an apology, urging me not to act rashly. Then, with urgency, she declared it meant nothing and asked me to wait for her, claiming she was going home. Slamming the door shut, I walked away, heading straight to my car. By the time I left the parking lot, Lily was already halfway to me, shouting for me to wait. Update: Lily arrived home less than 5 minutes after I did, appearing disheveled with messy hair and crumpled clothes. Tearfully, she approached me. She expressed deep remorse, apologizing for hurting me and breaking our marriage vows. Lily claimed that had she known I was being betrayed, she could have engaged in similar indiscretions. Despite her pleas, I felt an unexpected surge of anger. Her apologies continued as she insisted that her actions meant nothing to her, professing love for me and emphasizing the importance of our family. Overwhelmed, she cried, hiding her face and eventually sitting on the couch due to shaky legs. Dismissing her apologies, I asserted that what she did to our marriage was unforgivable and demanded to know the identity of the other person and the duration of their affair. I felt a sense of relief as she moved to the couch, removing her from my immediate presence. The urge to physically react to her betrayal lingered. She revealed the man's identity, someone from her workplace, and pleaded for understanding, claiming the affair should never have occurred. Lily justified her actions by pointing to supposed deception during girls' nights over the past 2 years, but insisted it didn't diminish her love for me. Expressing my inability to live with the public nature of her affair, I highlighted the impact on our reputation among co-workers and at social events. Lily begged for forgiveness, vowing that the betrayal would not recur and emphasizing the importance of salvaging our marriage and family. While she continued to speak, I stood up, turning away from her. I decided to leave to give myself time to think. I confronted her about destroying our marriage through her initial infidelity. A sudden cry and loud moan caught my attention, prompting me to look back at Lily on the floor, crying in desperation. Despite the overwhelming urge to comfort her, the anger and sense of betrayal made it clear I couldn't trust myself to stay near her. I silently left the house, spending the night in a hotel room without sleep. The next morning, I called my secretary and informed her I wouldn't be going to work for the day. I stayed in my room until noon. After grabbing a quick bite at the hotel restaurant, I passed by my house on the way to the office. There was a green Toyota in the driveway, which I recognized as Francine's, Lily's sister. At least I thought my daughters had their aunt's company, along with that of my cheating wife, providing a bit of comfort. What I didn't know then was that Lily was in the hospital. After leaving the house the previous evening and explaining the situation to her sister on the phone, Lily had a breakdown. It was only once I reached my office that I got the news. Francine, Lily's sister, called me, and we had a lengthy conversation. She explained that Lily was emotionally distressed and crying constantly. Less than an hour after I left the house the previous evening, my eldest daughter called Francine, saying Lily was delirious and I was not home. Francine then talked to her sister and promptly called an ambulance when she realized Lily's condition. Francine let me know she was still at my house, taking care of my 2 daughters for a few days. She strongly suggested that I visit my wife at Santa Mary's hospital in town. After the call ended, I was beyond shocked. Had I been selfish the previous evening? Did I abandon my family when they needed me the most? Maybe. But one thing was clear. If I stayed in the house with her that evening, there was a chance, however small, that I might have become violent due to what she had done. Yes, she wrecked our marriage, but until yesterday, I didn't see myself as someone who avoided problems. Was that exactly what I had done? Lily and I faced a significant problem, undoubtedly. But was that reason enough for me to abandon my family when they needed me? I felt terrible sitting behind my desk. I started crying, questioning if there could have been another way, a better way, with forgiveness and maybe reconciliation, a slim possibility. Of course, this mess was Lily's doing. She was entirely responsible for giving another man what should have been mine alone. However, breaking my marriage would hurt my 2 daughters too much. There had to be another solution. That's when I thought of forgiveness, with retribution. Once I recovered from the shock of learning about Lily's hospitalization, I got in my car and drove to the hospital. I had no idea what I would say to her, but one thing was certain. I was going to face the situation and find out exactly what she had done. Now I find myself lying in a hospital bed. A thought crosses my mind, recalling something my mother used to say: cheaters always face consequences, one way or another. Ron and I tied the knot when I was 20, and we were genuinely happy. We had 2 amazing daughters, a lovely home, a great neighborhood, and financial stability. More importantly, I loved my husband, and I knew he loved me back. When my youngest daughter turned 6, I landed a job at a film studio near Ron's workplace. With the fall of the Iron Curtain and the gradual democratization of communism, there was a high demand for U.S. films in Ukraine. Being fluent in Ukrainian and having acting experience from university, I secured a position as a female voice translator for English films, translating them into the Ukrainian language. It was a fantastic job with good pay, and I excelled at it. After 5 years, a new voice translator named Victor Dino joined us. He was a tall, attractive man in his late 20s with dark blonde hair. Most girls at the studio had a crush on him, but he seemed oblivious to the attention. Vic, born in the U.S. with Ukrainian-speaking grandparents, was perfectly bilingual. We started working together often, and a deep friendship developed between us. That's when my troubles began. Without realizing it, I found myself thinking I was in love with him. Initially, he treated me like the other girls, discussing work matters, and we worked well together. Eventually, he started joining us on alternate Fridays, and our friendship grew into something deeper. We became more than just colleagues. We became good friends. I confided in him about my life, sharing things I had never told my husband, especially when Vic began joining us at the pubs. My first mistake was not telling Ron that our girls' night out was now mixed. I enjoyed Vic's company and didn't want to share his attention with my husband on those nights. Our friendship turned into something deeper, and we found ourselves dancing together frequently. I didn't realize how far things had gone until one evening, while dancing to a slow song, he kissed me passionately. It wasn't a friendly or family kiss. I was shocked. That's how it all started. The following Friday, he found an excuse to take me out of the pub, and we engaged in intimate moments in his car. From there, our passion escalated, and soon we were engaging in more explicit activities in the backseat of his car. Despite feeling guilty, when I got home, I made sure to show Ron the love he deserved. However, I failed to realize that Ron, as my husband, deserved my complete love, and I shouldn't have given any of it to Vic. Working with Vic every day made it impossible to keep away from him. Gradually, even at work, we developed the habit of hugging and kissing when no one was around. From my perspective, this behavior with Vic didn't diminish my love for Ron. I still would have given my life for him, and I had no intention of hurting him with my affair with Vic. I was wrong. Making love with Vic wasn't better than making love with my husband. By the time Ron found out about my affair with Vic, we had been lovers for 4 months. While I didn't love Vic like I loved my husband, the physical aspect was fantastic. The freedom I felt with Vic, not having to restrain myself, made all the difference. When making love with my husband, I had to hold back to avoid him thinking less of me. With Vic, I had no such restrictions, since I didn't care what he thought about me. This was the main reason I did things with Vic that I had never done with my husband. I think Vic and I were really thoughtless and careless in how we behaved in front of our colleagues. Vic didn't care much since he wasn't married. But because of our public behavior, it was only a matter of time before my husband found out about me and Vic from a jealous coworker. We should have been more discreet. Even if Ron never found out about my affair, I now understand it would still have been terribly wrong. The evening Ron caught us was the worst moment of my life. He yelled at me to go to hell and take my lover with me. Just before he turned to leave the car, I knew my marriage was in deep trouble. I even stepped on Vic in my rush to leave his car and catch up with my husband, but I was too late. By the time I was halfway to his car, he was speeding away, leaving me standing there in the middle of the parking lot. Until then, I considered my love for Ron like a fire burning only for him, and I knew he felt the same about me. Then one day, when Vic entered my life and kissed me for the first time, it was like a spark from that fire ignited another fire burning for Vic. These emotions for Vic didn't take anything away from the love I felt for my husband. I convinced myself it was like when my youngest daughter was born. Loving her with all my heart didn't reduce the love I still had for my eldest daughter. It's incredible, the things we tell ourselves to justify our basest urges. Children don't expect a parent to love only them, and we never vow to our children to forsake all others. Yes, the love of a parent for a child is far different from the love one should have for their spouse. But I made sure those thoughts never reached my consciousness while I played games with Vic. I know my husband doesn't see it the same way I did then, and I don't blame him. I understand that if the roles were reversed and he had another woman in his life, I would be devastated. Human thoughts and emotions are mysterious, and sometimes we shouldn't try to reason them. So now, I'm here in a hospital bed. Each time I wake from my dreamless rest, I start thinking about the events of the last few months. I cry and feel sorry for myself. Then the nurse injects me again with something, and I sleep once more. A wonderful sleep that allows me to forget everything. I wish I could never wake up again and find peace with myself. But each time, just before I pass out, I see a picture of Ron and me on our wedding day. Oh God, help me, my children, my husband. I can't leave them. I must fight the urge to hide on the other side. Life is a never-ending combat. My father once told me, if you stop fighting, then you had no right to be living in the first place. I am alive. Ron and my daughters are alive. And I will live also. After all, they are the loves of my life. Yes, I will, for my husband and my family. To me, Vic is just dirt now. He had absolutely no right to be in my life in the first place. If Ron allows me, I will be, once again and for the rest of my life, the faithful wife I used to be. When I wake up, how long in the future, I don't know. But I will come back into my family's world. Of that, I am certain. When I do, the first thing I hope to see is my husband standing there in front of me, so that I can start the difficult task of making it up to him. I don't know how many days I have to stay here in the hospital bed, but I beg everyone to pray for Ron and our daughters.
Story 2.
I caught her on top of the affair partner and started live streaming her cheating on the spot. I just celebrated my 48th birthday this past January. Normally, my wife of 22 years used to throw celebration parties for me on such occasions, but our marriage began to fall apart ever since she joined a co-ed baseball group, mostly consisting of men. This happened nearly a year ago, and it triggered a series of events that led to the breakdown of our marriage. My wife is 42, and at first I thought she might be going through some sort of midlife crisis. Over the years, she has gained a lot of weight, particularly during the COVID lockdown when she was working from home. Despite her dedication to home exercise and dieting, the results were not showing, and the lockdown took a toll on her emotional well-being. With our kids out of the house, it was just the two of us most of the time. I never complained. Instead, I tried to encourage her as best I could. I understood that it's part of the aging process, and I've never been in great shape myself, to be honest. She's the attractive one, the type who enjoys receiving compliments, dressing up, and going out in public. Her job in marketing makes her value her image and first impressions. When COVID restrictions began to ease up, she felt the need to join active group activities. I remember we debated which group she should join and registered on an app called Meetup, where you can find group activities in your area. We considered various options, but the most convenient was a baseball group meeting 3 times a week with mostly male members. I wanted to join too, but my work schedule didn't allow it. I work as a plumber and often have long, late hours. My wife thinks I'm a workaholic, and honestly, I enjoy working because of the satisfaction I get from completing tasks. I work for a friend now. I used to run my own business, but it became too hectic for me with all the responsibilities. I just wanted to work and go home, leaving others to handle the additional tasks. After my wife joined the co-ed baseball group, I remember her first game. She was so exhausted, her whole body was sore. I had to massage her feet and thighs when I got home, and she said she really enjoyed it. After a few weeks, she couldn't stop talking about a guy named Craig. She mentioned that he was the best player on the team but was very controlling, and she disliked him. She claimed he flirted with all the women, described him as obnoxious, and a cheater who badmouthed his ex-wife to everyone, even though no one had ever seen her. He had been through multiple failed marriages and was known as a muscle car enthusiast. After a few more games, she began to complain that he used to smoke a lot and would invite some of the group members to smoke with him after the games. Keep in mind, this was a group of people in their 40s acting like teenagers. After about a month of my wife attending the games, she was getting back in shape, but still had issues with this guy. This time her complaint was that he not only smoked, but was involved in dealing as well. He would get people hooked on the samples and turn them into his customers. So his job was distributing and selling marijuana MJ and working as a mechanic. She mentioned that a long time ago, he was in the minor league and on the path to going pro before he had an accident while drag racing. He always had problems with substance misuse and lived a fast-paced life. I asked my wife how she knew all these personal things about him, and she said he wouldn't stop talking and bragging about everything. She explained that everyone liked him despite all of that because he was also funny, outgoing, offered to work on their cars for free, and gave out free MJ. However, she emphasized that she didn't find him amusing. I recall a night when she came home smelling like MJ. I asked why she smelled that way, and she told me that after the game she was hanging out with some of her teammates and they were smoking, so it made sense, right? There was no reason to doubt her. This started happening every time she returned from the game. Since she played 3 times a week, she came back home smelling like MJ. One time after the game, she took a shower, and I joined her. We became intimate, and I kissed her. There was no mistaking that she had been smoking. I could taste it in her mouth. I asked her right then and there if she was smoking, and she said she tried it once because they were passing it around. And she felt it would be awkward if she didn't smoke. I lost my temper. The mood immediately changed because we have 3 kids together. A 23-year-old son, a 21-year-old daughter, and an 18-year-old son. I confronted her for being a hypocrite because she had told our children never to smoke or be influenced by peer pressure. And here she was doing exactly what she had warned them against. I inquired about how she would react if our kids emulated her behavior, succumbing to peer pressure, and her response was that I should calm down. She brushed it off as a one-time occurrence, insisting she hadn't even inhaled it. I chose not to engage in an argument or lecture her about MJ use because she was the type to preach to others and discipline our children if they engaged in such behavior. I'm generally the quiet type, not fond of confrontation, and certainly not the disciplinarian in our family. It surprised me to see her acting so out of character. Something had changed within her that day. The smoking itself didn't particularly bother me. It was her hypocrisy that troubled me. I wondered who she'd picked it up from, and I found it unsettling that someone who would raise a fuss if my kids or I engaged in such activities seemed so nonchalant. She spent nearly a month complaining about this guy, emphasizing how awful he was, and then she went ahead and sampled his product. In the subsequent games, I noticed she continued to use cannabis, attempting to mask it by taking a shower, washing her sportswear, and brushing her teeth. Nevertheless, the odor lingered, but I refrained from confronting her again. I knew she would either lie or come up with some flimsy excuse, and I didn't want to broach the topic. I was secretly relieved because I had something to hold over her head in case she resorted to her usual self-righteous behavior. Thanksgiving was approaching, and my 3 children came to visit. My wife was conspicuously absent, which was unusual because she typically prepared the Thanksgiving meal and hosted a big party with friends and family, cooking more than we could possibly eat. But this time she was gone all day. When she returned, I asked her where she'd been, and she claimed she'd been visiting friends. When I probed further, she said she'd had car trouble, so she took her car to Craig to fix it. I questioned why she hadn't informed us, especially since it was Thanksgiving. Her response seemed insufficient to me. I asked her what was going on, as she was aware that Thanksgiving was approaching and her priority should have been spending time with the family, not fixing her car. I pointed out that most people spend the holiday with their families. She insisted she'd already told our daughter she'd be late and that our daughter should prepare the Thanksgiving meal. Even our children noticed the change in her behavior. They thought we were having marital problems because they believed we were arguing a lot, which was why their mom was offering all these excuses and failing to prepare for Thanksgiving as she usually did. On Thanksgiving Day, my daughter couldn't manage everything by herself. My wife claimed she was sick and retired to bed after returning from the supposed mechanic trip to fix her car. For the first time in a long while, I had to take my wife and kids to a restaurant on Thanksgiving. My wife was in bed, and I had to convince her to come to the restaurant with us. She wanted me to tell the kids that she was sick, but I insisted she should tell them herself. I didn't want to have to explain to my kids that their mom had been making new friends, smoking a lot, and slacking. I was always at work, and I couldn't monitor her every move. At that point, the idea that she might be having an affair hadn't crossed my mind. My daughter entered the room and noticed that something was off with her mom's behavior. Concerned, she came to her senses and realized she was acting unusually. She finally got up and started pretending like everything was okay. When we were at the restaurant, my kids noticed that she wasn't herself. She was making awkward jokes and seemed disconnected, as if she didn't want to be there but was forced to. After leaving the restaurant, my daughter jokingly asked me what I'd done to her mom because she was acting unlike herself. She also observed that my wife had lost a lot of weight and wondered if her behavior was related to her extreme weight loss. I decided to be honest with my daughter. I told her that her mom had joined a baseball team, made some new unusual friends, and had started using MJ with them. This had been going on for the past 4 months since she joined the baseball team. My daughter thought it was a joke because my wife's actions were completely out of character. After Thanksgiving, my kids left, and I talked to my wife about the need for change. I told her she couldn't continue acting like a college girl. At this point, it still hadn't crossed my mind that she might be having an affair. I had trusted her so much that I couldn't imagine her doing such a thing to me. The real trouble started when I noticed that our shared bank account, used to pay recurring bills like groceries and utilities, was overdrawn. I received a notification on my phone that $1,200 had been withdrawn from the account. I tried calling my wife, but she didn't answer her phone. I completed my work assignment, canceled the next one for the day, and decided to go home to check on her because something strange was going on. When I arrived home, I noticed a 1964 Pontiac GTO parked on the street, a car I hadn't seen before. I have an affinity for classic cars, which is why it caught my attention. I'm quite the enthusiast for classic automobiles. I parked my car in the driveway, right behind my wife's car, and went to open the front door to enter the house. I immediately noticed that someone had hastily exited through the door leading to the backyard. I assumed it was my wife because her car was in the driveway. And she had been home since her job no longer required her to work in the office due to the lifting of COVID restrictions. As I was about to open the door, the backyard door slammed shut. Believing it was my wife whom I didn't see, I couldn't wait to confront her about the withdrawal from our account. In my rush to ask her about the money taken from our account and why she hadn't been answering her phone, I headed towards the backyard door and opened it. I heard the backyard fence being opened. This alerted me that something was amiss because for someone to reach the backyard fence so quickly, they must have been running. Therefore, I concluded that it wasn't my wife, and the only logical explanation was that it was a burglar or someone fleeing from me. The person, whoever it was, must have been running because I calculated the speed required to reach the fence within that time FRA. The fence isn't visible when you open the backyard entrance door since it's parallel to the building and parts of the structure block the view. To see who enters or exits the backyard through the fence gate, you have to enter the backyard itself. By the time I reached the backyard and opened the gate, the person had vanished. I surveyed the surroundings and noticed the unmistakable smell of MJ in the air, indicating that someone had been smoking here. Suddenly, I heard my wife calling me from the house, so I hurried back. When I saw her, she appeared as if she had just taken a shower. I inquired about the person who had been smoking in the backyard, and she denied anyone being there, asserting that she had smoked in the backyard earlier because she knew how much I disliked the smell. I told her that she was clearly not telling the truth, especially considering her unusual behavior over the past 5 months and her allowing people into our home. I confronted her about crossing a line. I asked her directly if she was having an affair, particularly with the person who had rushed off our property. She vehemently denied it and acted as though I were speaking a different language. I then questioned her about why she hadn't been answering my calls and the $1,200 withdrawal from our shared account, which we used for paying our bills. She explained that she had lent the money to a friend in need and that they would repay it as soon as possible. I was utterly bewildered at this point. It was hard to believe the words coming from my wife's mouth. They sounded like they were from either a gambler or someone obsessed with MJ. The information was too bizarre to comprehend. I asked her if her friend believed she was a bank and why she hadn't sought my permission before making such a substantial withdrawal. She became irritable in response. I warned her that if she had given the money to her friends, there would be consequences. I made it clear that I expected the money back in the account by tomorrow. That evening, I took the time to review all our bank statements and noticed that she wasn't contributing her fair share of money to the account. A significant portion of my wife's income is based on commissions, so the more hours she puts in, the more money she earns. I observed that she was only contributing about 1/3 of the amount she was supposed to, which explained why the account balance was lower than usual and why I received a notification for the large withdrawal. I confronted her about not contributing her fair share and discovered that she was putting in only the bare minimum hours required to maintain her job. I inquired about what she had been doing with her time if she wasn't working. She began making excuses, claiming she was constantly tired due to working out and playing sports to lose weight. She argued that the kids were no longer at home and we didn't need all that money anyway. I told her that if she decided to reduce her working hours, she should stop lending my money to her friends and cut down on hanging out with her MJ using buddies. I also insisted that she quit playing that sport. I gave her an ultimatum. It was either our marriage or her sports. She reacted strongly. She hurled various insults at me, calling me insecure and saying I wasn't man enough. I informed her that if she continued to play, we might have to end our 22-year-long marriage. She became furious that I would even consider ending the marriage over something seemingly trivial. She suggested that I should talk to someone because she believed I was being emotional and acting immature. I told her that she wasn't the same person I had married, that she had changed overnight since starting this baseball game and hanging out with her new friends. Despite being home all day, she no longer took care of household chores and cooking as she used to. She was barely working and appeared to be indulging in recreational activities like a college dropout. She accused me of being jealous of her improving appearance and life, implying she might consider my offer, and then she angrily left the room. We had an intense argument throughout that night, and I ended up sleeping on the couch. The following day, she refused to speak to me or cook for me, hoping that I would apologize and allow her to continue her negative behavior, completely disregarding the unexplained withdrawal from my account. We didn't exchange words that day. The next day happened to be one of her baseball game days. Before I left for work, she attempted to grab my attention to see if I was serious about pursuing a divorce if she played her game. As I was getting ready for work, she walked past me and loudly declared that she would do as she pleased, asserting that I couldn't interfere with her happiness. I remained silent, got dressed, and left the house. In the afternoon, I contacted a divorce lawyer to prepare a separation agreement. My intention was to shock my wife, hoping that she would realize the potential loss of her family due to her actions. Whether you might call it a midlife crisis or menopause, I believe that serving her divorce papers might jolt her out of it. The lawyer drafted a legal separation document, and I picked it up after work. When I returned home, my wife was not there and I wasn't sure where she had gone. When she finally came home, I noticed she wasn't dressed for a baseball game. My plan was to serve her with the divorce papers to emphasize that I was serious, with the hope that she wouldn't sign them. Despite the challenges she had put me through, I still loved my wife and didn't want to lose her. My goal was for her to realize that she might end up divorced and without anyone to support her. She entered through the front door, and I was waiting in the living room. As she passed by me, she continued to give me the silent treatment, heading to the kitchen to prepare food for herself. I left the couch to retrieve the divorce papers. She was still in the kitchen when I handed her the papers to sign. The expression of shock on her face, with wide-open eyes and mouth, caught me off guard. I hadn't expected her next move. She pushed me and threw the divorce papers at my face, expressing disbelief that I would follow through with this. She left the kitchen in tears, exclaiming that she couldn't believe I was taking these steps. She ran upstairs to the master bedroom, crying and lamenting that I had initiated the divorce proceedings even though she hadn't gone to the baseball game. I found myself in the kitchen, the divorce papers scattered across the floor, but I couldn't help but smile because everything had gone according to plan. Collecting the papers, I placed them back in the folder, thinking that perhaps this had given her the shock she needed. Later that night, I received a call from my daughter, who asked me why I was divorcing her mom over a baseball game. It turned out that my wife had complained to our daughter about me. At that moment, I knew I had already succeeded. Knowing my wife, I was aware that she was too embarrassed to beg herself, so she was trying to use our daughter as an intermediary. I explained to my daughter that she had visited us during Thanksgiving and had seen her mother's condition and her strange behavior. I didn't explicitly mention my suspicion of my wife having an affair, but interestingly, my daughter remarked that it didn't seem like she was having an affair and encouraged me to work through this challenging period with her. We spent over an hour on the phone. The following day, before heading to work, my wife surprised me by preparing breakfast and lunch for the first time in about 6 months. She apologized for everything she had put me through and assured me that she would start behaving correctly. She claimed she had done some introspection and realized her wrongs. I told her I would give her a month to get her act together, and if she continued to smoke and hang out with her friends, then I would have no choice but to proceed with the divorce. I also reminded her that the money needed to be repaid to my account, and she agreed. We made amends, and I left for work. Update: the following day, when I returned home, my wife and I had another conversation. She confided in me, explaining that she's been under a great deal of stress due to how COVID has impacted her job. coupled with my heavy work schedule. She admitted that she had been seeking an escape. Initially, the baseball game provided some relief, but she eventually succumbed to the allure of MJ and began using it. She mentioned that it had a relaxing effect and helped alleviate her anxiety. For the first time, she revealed that she had been battling depression and had been taking medication for it. Surprisingly, she disclosed that since she started using MJ, her reliance on depression medication had gradually decreased. I asked her about the person in our backyard who had fled, and she claimed there was nobody there. However, I could tell she was not being truthful. Regarding the money withdrawal, she apologized and asked me not to be offended, explaining that it might take her a while to replace the money because she used it to buy MJ. Although I was deeply upset, I didn't want to disrupt the moment as my wife appeared to be showing remorse, like she was having a significant realization. I hoped that after this I could finally have my wife back. The next couple of days were relatively normal, as if we had returned to our usual routine. I came to terms with the fact that her smoking might not cease, since she claimed it helped with her anxiety and depression. I assured her that I wasn't overly concerned about her smoking. My main worry was the people she purchased it from, as those who deal with such substances are often questionable characters, especially since my state doesn't permit MJ. She continued to smoke in secret, trying to conceal it from me as much as possible. I opted not to confront her to avoid a conflict, which inadvertently made her think she was adept at hiding it. She began picking up extra hours at work and contributed slightly more to our shared account, although not to the extent she had before. I was responsible for the mortgage, the largest bill, and our shared account was intended to cover various expenses. In the end, I was covering around 70 to 80% of the expenses. One evening, while we were watching TV together, her cell phone rang, and she answered it, then walked into another room. I could hear her giggling from the other room. A few minutes later, she returned to the couch, and I asked her who it was. She got defensive and claimed it was just a friend. I found her reaction unusual, which raised a red flag. On another occasion, I came home early and opened my refrigerator to grab some beer, but it was missing. Since only my wife and I live at home, our kids have moved out, and she doesn't drink beer, I wondered who might have taken it. I considered the possibility that she had cleared some space in the refrigerator, but it didn't seem likely. This led me to suspect that my wife might be inviting someone over without being entirely honest with me. Christmas came and went, and my kids noticed that my wife was behaving better than she had during Thanksgiving, but I had a feeling she was just putting on an act. In January, she began reverting to her old ways, smoking excessively, sleeping throughout the day, and working less. When my birthday came, she didn't throw me a surprise party, buy me a gift, or want to go out for dinner to celebrate. My kids called to wish me a happy birthday. I reminded her that she had forgotten my birthday, and she was surprised she had forgotten. I told her that she was smoking too much, and it seemed to be affecting her memory. She explained she had marked it on her calendar but had forgotten and apologized to me. I first encountered the Ring doorbell at one of my clients' houses, and we communicated through it. I hadn't known about the Ring before, but I thought it was great that it allowed you to see who was at your front door in real time, and it connected to your phone. In the back of my mind, I considered using it to monitor my wife, observing what she did throughout the day and who she was inviting into our home. So, I purchased the Ring doorbell and installed it in our house. Initially, when I installed the camera, my wife didn't pay it much attention. She knew I'd always been a gadget guy and considered it just one of my many useless gadgets, as she often called them. The Ring doorbell was connected to my Wi-Fi, so I received notifications when someone was at our door, and it recorded videos in the cloud that I could access at any time. On the first day after installation, while I was at work, I received a motion-activated video recording notification from the Ring. I was busy and didn't have a chance to check my phone for at least an hour. When I finally checked the Ring notification, I saw a man at our front door. He didn't even have to knock. My wife was already there waiting for him. She opened the door and welcomed him inside. It was clear that she knew him. The thought racing through my mind at that moment was that this could be the same guy who had dashed through my backyard, the one who'd been helping himself to my beer in my absence. Maybe this was Craig, the person supplying MJ to my wife, or even the man she might be having an affair with. I quickly checked the real-time camera feed, and it appeared the man was still inside my house and hadn't left. I was 30 minutes away from home and hadn't even completed my current assignment. I informed the client that I needed to return and sped home as fast as I could. The man had been in my house for over an hour, and I monitored the Ring camera on my phone as I drove. The video feed wasn't very reliable while driving, it kept freezing, so I decided to focus on the road instead, making my way home as quickly as possible to catch him inside my house. I felt my anger and anxiety building up. Upon arriving home, I only saw my wife's car in the driveway. I rushed inside, heading straight to the master bedroom. The room was empty, the bed was disheveled, and the air felt stuffy. I couldn't tell if it was from my wife's shower or just the stagnant air. My wife was nowhere to be found in the bedroom, nor was the man. I checked the closet and under the bed. At that moment, I heard the backyard door open, so I hurried downstairs to see who it might be, thinking the guy might be trying to escape as he had before. As I was halfway down the stairs, my wife emerged from her home office located downstairs near the kitchen. She had a shocked expression, eyes wide open, as if she'd seen a ghost. I noticed she was wearing only a white robe, and she told me that I'd startled her, asking why I was home early and why I seemed so anxious. I had to collect myself, not wanting to give any indication that I suspected a man had just been in my house, possibly involved with my wife, and that I'd narrowly missed catching them in the act. It started to sink in that I had just missed them. I decided there was no need to confront her, as I knew she would deny everything, even if I showed her the ring footage of him entering the house. Instead, I thought it best to wait and catch them in the act. From the look in her eyes, I could tell she suspected something was amiss but couldn't figure out how I knew or why I wasn't confronting her. I came up with a random excuse, pretending to be searching for a tool, a Makita cordless metal hole punch. Although she had no idea what that was, I wanted to act as if everything was normal, while I could sense her trying to read my reactions. I descended into the basement, grabbed a random tool, and returned to the main part of the house. She was still standing there, almost like she was in a state of shock and couldn't move. I approached her and gave her a kiss on the cheek, as I typically do when leaving the house. Even as I got closer to her, it was evident that she had been smoking not too long ago. I pulled back from her as if everything was normal, inquired why she was acting strangely, and if she was okay. She replied with a yes and escorted me to the door. As I walked toward the driveway, I couldn't help but wonder how this guy managed to be with my wife and escape right under my nose. I believed this might have been the second time he had been with her, and I had narrowly missed catching him. I considered the possibility that he might still be hiding inside the house. I decided to check the ring footage to see if he had already left. My wife was still at the door when I reached my car, just staring at me. I tried to act as normal as possible, but once I got into my work van, I felt paralyzed. I knew she was watching me from the partially open door, so I sat in my car pretending to look at my paperwork while checking my phone to confirm whether he had left the house. Indeed, he had left before I arrived home. I had just missed him again. As I sat there reviewing the ring footage, my cell phone rang, and it was my friend, the person I worked for, asking why I left the client's place without completing the job, as the client was complaining. I was working on a bathroom renovation for the client and contemplated calling off the job for the day, but I knew it would be a hassle for another plumber to pick up where I'd left off. Therefore, I decided to return to work and finish the job for the client. I found it difficult to concentrate at work. Although my plumbing skills were second nature to me, my mind kept returning to the bewildering idea that my wife was willing to throw away 22 years of marriage for an MJ seller and some recreational time. I couldn't fathom how she transformed from a well-mannered wife with strict traditional values into a frequent MJ user. Despite her promises to quit after finishing my work that day, I couldn't bear going home, so I sat in my van, contemplating my next steps. I decided to visit a local bar, despite not being a heavy drinker, just to be around people. At the bar, I ordered some beer and sat on a bar stool, deep in thought. I came up with the idea of purchasing a video recorder and a GPS device to install in my wife's car, allowing me to monitor her movements. I went to a nearby electronics store but couldn't find a reputable GPS or hidden camera. I ended up using my phone to order one online, but I did manage to buy 2 voice-activated recorders, intending to place them in my bedroom and my wife's home office. When I returned home, my wife had prepared my favorite meal, something she used to do in the past, especially when she felt guilty about something. I remained composed and pretended that everything was normal. After a while, I went upstairs to take a shower and join her for dinner. I even remarked that it was unusual for her to be making dinner, and she tried to insist that she always did. We both chuckled it off. I made an effort to conceal my pain and resentment toward my wife. However, after dinner, I could no longer contain my emotions, and I felt the urge to confront her. Instead, I decided to take the dog for a walk. I told my wife that I was going out for a walk. Walking the dog helped clear my mind. I considered calling my daughter to inform her about her mom's affair but decided against it, not wanting to involve her, fearing she might jeopardize my plans to catch my wife red-handed. I was seeking more evidence, although I already had some. I wanted to confirm that I wasn't imagining things. I had seen her affair partner on my Ring camera, a brown-haired, tall, skinny guy. I knew his face and could pick him out of a lineup. I just wanted to see how deep this situation went. When I returned home, my wife was already asleep. I didn't feel comfortable sleeping in the same bed where she might have been with her dealer and affair partner just hours ago. Sleeping in the guest room would arouse suspicion, so I decided to endure my discomfort and sleep next to her. That night, I struggled to sleep, woke up in the middle of the night, and installed the voice-activated recorder in her office and our bedroom. The following morning, she woke up before me and prepared breakfast as if nothing had happened. It was easier for me to pretend this time compared to the previous day. At work that day, I couldn't resist checking my Ring camera regularly even though I had set up notifications for any motion detected. My wife only left the house to go grocery shopping, as she had called me to let me know, and returned with bags. The second and third days were uneventful. She rarely left the house, and I began to wonder if something was amiss or if she had caught on to my Ring camera surveillance. So, on the evening of the third day after I had spotted the stranger at my door, I retrieved the voice-activated recorder, went to my car, and started listening to the recorded conversations. It became evident that my wife had been spending hours on the phone with this man named Craig, who was a part of her baseball group. From their conversation, it seemed like my wife was no longer attending the games, but she had developed a close relationship with him. He was asking when he could come over, but my wife expressed concern that I had unexpectedly shown up at home one time, making her apprehensive about being intimate at our house. They couldn't be intimate at his place due to his girlfriend and 3 kids, and he didn't want to spend money on a hotel. He suggested they meet in a parking lot, but my wife refused to be intimate in that setting. She had a clear boundary. A parking lot was crossing the line for her, yet being intimate in our bed was somehow acceptable. He proposed that she come to his workplace, where they had been intimate before, but she was concerned about his business partner. Apparently, during Thanksgiving, she went to see him at his shop and his partner caught them. He co-owns a mechanic shop with his business partner, and his partner didn't appreciate their workplace being used for such activities. Still, he was insistent on having my wife visit his place of business, even if it jeopardized their business relationship, all for intimacy with a married woman. Based on their conversation, it seemed like my wife was receiving MJ in exchange for intimacy, or at the very least, a discount. That was the impression I got from their discussion. Lying in bed, I contemplated my next steps and how to proceed from here. I feared that my plan had backfired because my wife had grown suspicious, potentially missing an opportunity to confront her on D-Day. The next morning, while taking a shower, I had the idea to locate my wife's stash of MJ. I knew she was smoking daily and trying to mask her breath with peppermint and mouthwash to hide it from me. I suspected she might be dependent on it as a coping mechanism since she wasn't taking her medication. My plan was to find her stash and dispose of it, forcing her to invite him for more. The challenge was how to locate the stash without her knowing. She was home all day, only leaving the house for a couple of hours. It seemed I might have to thoroughly search the house to find it. However, I was reminded that my daughter would be visiting our house for the weekend to see her mom. They typically go to her mom's place in the countryside for the entire day, which would give me enough time in the house to search for her stash. This visit was not unusual, since they visited her mom about once a month. I had already returned the voice recorder to her office. The rest of the week was uneventful, looking ahead to when my daughter paid us a visit. She inquired about her mom's well-being, and I assured her that everything was fine. I refrained from revealing anything to her, as I suspected that she might inadvertently tip off my wife. My daughter isn't the best at keeping secrets. On Friday, the GPS and hidden camera I had ordered arrived. On Saturday morning, my wife and daughter set out to visit my wife's mother. With them out of the house, I took the opportunity to listen to the voice-activated recorder in my wife's office. It confirmed my suspicions about the guy involved in her life, indicating he was a dealer, possibly dealing with more than just MJ. However, I couldn't determine if my wife was using anything more than cannabis. I also learned from the recordings that the guy used to play for a minor league and was on the path to going pro until he had an accident, which led to an obsession with painkillers. This was his downfall. In contrast, my wife didn't have any known traumatic experiences, so it baffled me why she was drawn to such a person and started using MJ. Her upbringing had been fairly normal, and her recent revelation about depression caught me off guard. Perhaps it stemmed from the prolonged time she spent at home, potentially leading to weight gain. My wife retained her suspicions that I had discovered her affair, but when questioned about how she knew, she claimed ignorance regarding my sources. I surmised that she might have made this statement to deter him, as he was eager to meet her. Before she left with our daughter for the weekend, I installed the camera in both the master bedroom and the living room. My next task was to locate my wife's stash of MJ. I scoured the entire house, contemplating even hiring a sniffer dog. Yet by the day's end, I came up empty-handed, leading me to believe she either had nothing left or had taken it with her. Their return was scheduled for Sunday afternoon. While sitting on the couch watching TV, an idea struck me. I should search the backyard for any potential hiding spots. I ventured outside about an hour before sunset and began inspecting the area. I suspected that she might have buried her stash, but to my fortune, I didn't have to wait long before stumbling upon a Ziploc bag containing MJ and a grinder. I promptly disposed of the MJ down the toilet and discreetly returned the Ziploc bag to its original location. It appeared that she hid it outdoors to avoid arousing suspicion due to the smell, since she often engaged in her activities in the backyard, and her affair partner had once slipped away from there. I made the decision to move the camera from the living room to the backyard. My goal was to conceal it so that it wouldn't be too conspicuous. Once I had set up the camera, I conducted a test run, and it performed well. This put me at ease, as I could now monitor the activities in my house without my wife having any clue about it. My next step was to install the GPS in her car once she returned from her visit to her mother's. My ultimate objective is to gather evidence against her for our eventual divorce. She came back home that Sunday evening, and after she'd gone to bed, I discreetly installed the GPS device in her car. On Monday morning, my daughter returned to her own place. During my work hours, I contacted the same divorce lawyer who had previously drafted our separation agreement. I laid out my situation for the lawyer, including my wife's infidelity. I asked how I could leverage the recorded evidence to my advantage, but he explained that it would have little impact on my divorce case, as our state operates under a no-fault divorce system. This means that we can only cite irreconcilable differences as the reason for our divorce, and my wife cannot be penalized for her infidelity by a judge. The lawyer assured me that the divorce paperwork would be ready the following day. I also confided in my friend, the one I work for, about my situation. He understood that I might have to leave work at any moment because the camera was linked to my phone while I was at my job, allowing me to monitor my wife's movements. On that particular day, I observed my wife in the backyard searching for her MJ. She appeared quite frustrated, but eventually returned inside the house. I had my phone on standby, ready to be alerted if she invited him over again. However, instead of that, she got into her car and drove away. Since I had the GPS installed in her car, I could track her location. She drove to an unfamiliar place and stayed there for about 30 minutes before returning home. I marked the location for further investigation to find out where she had gone. I felt a bit disappointed that things didn't unfold as I had originally planned, but at least with the GPS in her car, I had some insight into her activities. When she came back home, she headed to the backyard, lit up some MJ, and concealed the rest in the same spot. This confirmed my suspicion that she'd gone to meet him to obtain more. Update: one thing I forgot to mention is that once I discovered her infidelity, I promptly went for an STD test, and fortunately, the results came back negative. Since catching her affair partner on my Ring camera, I haven't had any intimacy with my wife. Historically, I've been the one initiating it in our relationship, so she hasn't actively sought it from me. Moreover, she's already romantically involved with her affair partner, and I strongly suspect that during her recent visit to him, they most likely had a physical relationship. There was no other reason for her to spend 30 minutes at that location. After work, I managed to trace the area she had visited and discovered that it was a mechanic shop. To my surprise, I spotted the unmistakable 1964 Pontiac GTO, the same car I had seen on my street on the day I almost caught someone fleeing from my backyard. I felt intense anger knowing that this guy had been inside my house. I felt disrespected and had an urge to confront him right then and there, but I had to talk myself out of it. It's unsettling to think that he was so familiar with my backyard, suggesting he may have been there before. I parked my work van a few blocks away from his shop to observe it for a stakeout. It was getting late, but I remained there until I noticed him emerging from the shop with another friend. They had closed the garage doors of their shop and were standing in front, presumably smoking. I couldn't be certain if they were smoking cigarettes or MJ, as I was too far away to discern. I should have been on my way home, but I couldn't resist waiting and watching them. Deep down, I was comparing myself to him and questioning why my wife had chosen him over me, why she had opted to betray me with him. Something about his life excited her, something I couldn't replicate. Maybe she had grown weary of pretending to be a good person and had decided to reveal her true nature. After they finished smoking, he got into his car and drove off. I saw this as my opportunity to follow him and discover where he lived. He had already been to my house multiple times, engaged with my wife, so it seemed only fair that I should know where he lives in the hope of disrupting his relationship with his girlfriend. Eventually, I want to hurt this man. Dark thoughts swirled in my mind. I had a concealed hand tool, a Springfield Hellcat, in my car. I thought about driving up to him and destroying him there. However, I realized that I'd probably become the prime suspect if they discovered he had been with my wife. He drove his car to a restaurant and picked up a woman. Initially, I assumed that the woman was his girlfriend, so I took some pictures with my phone. The pictures weren't very clear due to the fading light, but I parked on the street to remain inconspicuous. He collected the female passenger, and I trailed behind him. They arrived at an apartment building with street parking, and I could discern from their body language that she wasn't his girlfriend. Their behavior indicated a strong attraction as they couldn't keep their hands off each other while entering the apartment. My suspicion grew that she might be another one of the women he was involved with romantically. I pondered whether to wait for him to exit so I could follow him and uncover his residence. Yet with no certainty of when he would leave, I opted to capture a picture of his license plate number and return home for the day. Now I knew that this man wasn't just a dealer but also a womanizer, with my wife being one of the women he was engaged with. The following days were exceedingly disheartening, and it became increasingly challenging to share a room with her. I was losing hope and contemplating ending it all, proceeding with the divorce so we could go our separate ways. I feared that sooner or later she would decipher the purpose of the Ring doorbell, discover the voice-activated recorder, or detect the hidden camera I was using to spy on her. It was a monotonous week, observing her conversing with her affair partner and watching her on camera smoking in the backyard at least twice a day. I estimated that it might take her 3 to 4 weeks to deplete her MJ stash, and I didn't want to wait that long. I couldn't endure living in the same house with her for such an extended period, knowing she was involved with another man. I wanted to bring this situation to a conclusion. So, when she went to bed, I ventured into the backyard with my flashlight and excavated her bag of MJ. I noticed that it also contained a blend of tobacco and MJ. In any case, I removed more than half of the contents, returned the rest, and then retired to bed. Update: after I left for work one morning, I observed her on camera smoking. I'm unsure if she noticed the reduction in the stash. Skipping ahead 3 days, I've been gathering all my documents in order. Besides the shared account, which doesn't hold substantial funds, and the house, which has already been paid off. There's nothing else that requires division except for our retirement savings. She has approximately $45,000 in her 401k, whereas I have around $870,000 in my Roth account. I anticipate that she will try to claim a share of my Roth account. According to my lawyer, a portion of my retirement savings will need to be allocated to her due to the duration of our marriage. However, she is unaware of the exact amount in my Roth account, since she has always been passive about retirement planning. I was the one responsible for financial planning and earning money, while her role was primarily focused on spending. I even had to persuade her to open a 401k account 9 years ago, and she made minimal contributions. The bulk of the savings is essentially free money, and she hasn't taken advantage of it. Her tendency has been to rely on me, all the while complaining that I work excessively or don't take enough time off. In reality, our plan was to retire early, motivating my hard work and dedication. Now that our children are grown, we intended to relocate to South America and spend the rest of our lives happily. However, it seems she prematurely checked out of our marriage and is now engaging in an affair. She is poised to take half of the work and effort I've invested over the years. My attorney mentioned that typically the longer the marriage, the more likely it is that retirement accounts will be divided fairly equally. I cannot allow this to happen. My hard-earned assets cannot go to waste. I upheld my end of the deal, remaining a loyal and caring husband, providing for my family, and working diligently to ensure her happiness. Despite my efforts, she decided to engage in a romantic relationship with another man. Based on the voice recording, I don't believe she intends to leave me for him. It appears she's merely enjoying the excitement of a fling. I don't think she's willing to trade the stable life she has with me for an unpredictable seller, but she revels in the thrill. She mentioned this on the voice-activated recorder. She can't contain her laughter at his remarks. He attempted to persuade her to leave me even, though he has a girlfriend and young children. I understand that listening to the voice-activated recorder is emotionally taxing, considering the things she's saying about me. Nevertheless, it's crucial that I uncover the truth and understand her thoughts about me. She referred to me as boring and unadventurous, criticized my performance in bed, and suggested that I didn't measure up to him, even dubbing me a 5-minute man, which is not accurate. I suspect she was saying these things to boost his ego. He's only 32 years old, a younger age than I initially thought, possibly because the baseball group primarily consisted of individuals in their 40s. As I presumed, he frequently complimented her, which bolstered her fragile self-esteem. I've come across instances on this site where younger men focus on middle-aged women with self-esteem issues. finding it easy to engage in intimate relationships with them. Using his license plate, I managed to uncover his place of residence and conducted some surveillance by driving past his house on a couple of occasions to keep an eye on him. During these observations, I noticed his girlfriend and his 3 children, all under the age of 10. One evening, while we were in bed, my wife initiated intimacy. I can't recall the last time this happened, but I informed her that I was too fatigued for it. She became upset because we hadn't been intimate for weeks. My reluctance to be close with her was due to the knowledge of her ongoing involvement with her affair partner. I mentioned that it had been a demanding week at work as an excuse. The truth is, I still find her physically appealing, and I do desire intimacy with her. However, in my view, she has become tainted, similar to a person engaging in street solicitation, and I felt that engaging with her would legitimize her actions. 2 days later, while I was at work, I received a notification from my Ring doorbell and promptly checked it. It was him, and my wife had invited him in, similar to previous occasions. This time, I wasn't far from home, only about 15 minutes away. I swiftly got into my car and headed back home, arriving in less than 10 minutes. On this occasion, I decided not to park my car in the driveway to avoid drawing attention, instead parking on the street. I had my Hellcat, which I always carry in my car, although I hadn't anticipated using it. I was emotionally prepared, having had time to contemplate such a moment. My intention wasn't to take a life, regardless of how strong my desire was to confront this man for showing disrespect. However, I had my personal protection, given that he is involved in dealing. I wasn't sure about his potential capabilities. My goal was to confront him at gunpoint and call the authorities. I hoped that he had MJ on him, which would lead to his arrest. I had my phone set to record, hanging it in my left shirt pocket to capture audio without needing to hold it to avoid the front door. I chose to enter through the backyard fence, since I believed the backyard was his potential escape route. At this point, approximately 20 minutes had passed since I received the Ring notification on my phone. I carefully slid the bolt of the wooden fence gate latch to open it from the outside, all while keeping my camera in my left pocket, still recording. As I entered through the backyard door leading to the kitchen, I held my keys in my right hand and my Hellcat in my left. Both the backyard and the kitchen doors were wide open. There, in my living room, I found my wife and the person she was involved with, both unclothed, engaging in an intimate act on the living room couch. Due to the open floor plan, I could see the living room from my vantage point in the kitchen. I dropped my keys on the floor to free up both of my hands to hold my Hellcat. They were both taken aback upon seeing me. Without hesitation, I began giving them commands to lie down on the floor or face dire consequences. They complied, with the man quickly getting on the floor. He was partially dressed, attempting to put on his pants before I ordered him to stop. While he was lying on the ground, my wife, who was now wearing a robe, tried to de-escalate the situation by saying, "I'm sorry, it's not what it seems." I made sure my left pocket camera was still recording because my left arm had partially obstructed the view. I continued to point my Hellcat at the affair partner, cursing at him. My wife, now wearing a robe, slowly attempted to rise. I allowed her to, as I was focused on the affair partner, and I ordered her to join him and stay flat on the ground. This action made it clear to her that I was serious, and she promptly obeyed. Later, I reviewed the recorded footage to gather these details, as my adrenaline had been running high. I knew I needed to establish control of the situation before contacting the police. With my wife on the floor, apologizing and insisting that her affair partner, Craig, meant nothing to her, he began begging me not to harm him. I took out my phone and dialed emergency. I told the dispatcher that a dealer is selling to my wife in my house and I have them down at gunpoint. The police dispatcher instructed me not to take any action and to wait for the arrival of the police. After ending the call with the dispatcher, I instructed Craig to stretch both his hands forward while lying down and pleaded with him not to give me a reason to use force. My wife remained on the floor, pleading with me. I walked over to the front door and swung it wide open, making it easy for the police to enter when they arrived. I noticed a bag of MJ on the living room table. Although it wasn't a substantial amount, I hoped it would be sufficient for the police to arrest him. I waited for what felt like an eternity, about 5 minutes. At this point, I was tired of keeping both of them terrified, all the while recording the entire incident. So, I decided to FaceTime my daughter, despite my wife's pleas to refrain from doing so. My daughter witnessed her mother lying there with her semi-naked affair partner. I explained the situation to her, and she began to cry, unable to believe what she was seeing. My wife felt embarrassed, her head hung low. As my daughter spoke, I heard the police vehicles pull into my driveway. They entered my house as I lowered my Hellcat. I approached them at the door and briefed them on the situation. Initially, there were 2 officers, but 2 more soon arrived, making a total of 4 officers and 2 patrol cars. The first officers detained him for the MJ in the living room. He attempted to shift the blame onto my wife, claiming it was her MJ, not his. It was quite amusing to watch them both accusing each other of ownership, effectively incriminating themselves. My wife tried to deny it was hers, insisting it belonged to him, but he admitted to selling it to her, effectively relinquishing ownership. In retrospect, I probably should have told the police it was my wife's, and you'll understand why later on. The police couldn't determine ownership definitively, so they detained both of them. Now there were 3 patrol cars parked in front of my house. They placed my wife in one of the patrol cars, allowing her to put on her clothing while she still had her robe on. It was an embarrassing moment since all the police officers who were male saw my wife partially unclothed. I felt somewhat uncomfortable about it, but I had to remind myself that she was now a matter of public record due to her involvement with these unsavory individuals. Upon weighing the MJ, they found it to be around 4 ounces, which is close to being a state jail felony. However, one of the officers later told me privately that the judge might reduce the charge to a class of misdemeanor possession if it was determined to be my wife's. By now, I wanted the police to take severe action against her affair partner. The cops escorted him to his car to search for more MJ, but he refused, stating they needed a warrant to do so. The cop replied that they had probable cause to believe the car contained evidence of criminal activities, since he had already admitted earlier to giving the MJ to my wife, essentially acknowledging his intention to distribute or sell it. It seemed as if all the police in my city had nothing else to do because more officers arrived. You would think a major drug bust was unfolding. Even the K9 unit joined the scene, making it clear they were determined to throw the book at this guy. Due to his prior criminal record, they were handling this case with significant force, attempting to secure a lengthy sentence for him. After their search, they found approximately 4 pounds of MJ in his possession, enough for a state jail felony. This offense carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 180 days imprisonment, a maximum of 2 years imprisonment, and a fine not exceeding $10,000. The evidence appeared solid, although the length of his prior offenses was uncertain, but it's likely he would face up to 2 years in prison. I'm not sure if an affair with another man's wife is worth all that trouble, but he chose the wrong person's wife to become involved with. They later charged him with the MJ found in my house and released my wife. He was arrested and taken away while his friend later came to retrieve his car. I also informed the police that I wanted him charged with trespassing, but they explained that he couldn't be charged with trespassing because infidelity isn't a crime and he was invited by my wife. They mentioned that they might need me to come to the police station to provide additional statements, even though I had already given my statement. Once my wife was released from the police car, she rushed into the bedroom and locked herself in. My daughter called me, revealing that my wife had been trying to contact her, but she refused to answer. She asked me what had happened, and I shared the whole story. She was in tears the entire time, and although I felt bad for live streaming the situation with my wife and her affair partner, it wasn't my fault. My wife had put us in this predicament, and I wasn't the only one who should be experiencing the consequences. My daughter inquired about the next steps, and I explained that I had already contacted and hired a real estate agent and we would be selling the house. I also mentioned that I had found a divorce lawyer and the divorce agreement had already been prepared. All that remained was to serve her with it. My daughter told me she would visit us next week. After our conversation, I knew it would be difficult for her, as she is very close to her mother. In the evening, I had mixed emotions about the entire situation, and my wife remained in the room. I felt a deep sense of sadness as our 22 years of marriage seemed to go down the drain. There were no heroes in this story, and it wasn't how I envisioned our relationship ending. Just 2 years ago, my wife and I vacationed in South America, visiting countries like Uruguay, Chile, and Peru, to look for houses to purchase. In just 1 year, she had thrown everything away, and I couldn't help but wonder why. Her carelessness in inviting him to our home was a shocking revelation. I'm relieved she did, because it revealed her true colors, and who knows if she had done this before. He might not be her only affair. That evening, I went to a local bar to have drinks with a friend. We discussed various topics, avoiding any mention of my wife and the earlier events. I was trying to divert my mind from the whole situation. While at the bar, drinking and chatting with my friend, my eldest son called. He had been informed by his sister about what had happened. He apologized for his mother's actions and expressed his willingness to support any decision I made. He understood that his mother had put everyone in this difficult position. This made me proud and emphasized that my son had matured. He also has a serious girlfriend, and they've already moved in together. I used to give him relationship advice, but now I felt like I was the one in need of guidance. When I returned home that evening, I didn't want to see my wife, so I chose to sleep in a different room. The following day, I went to work and had a conversation with my youngest son. I confided in my friend about what had transpired, and he offered his support. He also said he'd understand if I needed some time off to manage the divorce. I left work early to visit the lawyer's office before it closed. I collected the divorce agreement for my wife to sign and contacted the real estate agent to list the property for sale on the MLS. She informed me that she'd come by during the weekend to take some photos. When I returned home, my wife was waiting for me and expressed her readiness to talk. I told her I wouldn't engage in a conversation until she signed the divorce papers. She insisted that I allow her to speak first, promising to sign the divorce papers afterward. She even hinted that if I didn't let her talk, she might prolong the divorce process. I reminded her that she was in no position to make threats. If she wanted a public divorce, I was prepared to take it to the Supreme Court, and this calmed her down as she realized I didn't make empty threats. She requested that I bring the divorce papers for her to sign, but she also asked for an explanation of the terms within the divorce agreement before signing. I informed her that we planned to sell the house and divide the proceeds with a split of 60-40 in her favor. She would receive the $4,000 currently in our joint account as part of the agreement. In return, she agreed to an amicable divorce and would not make any claims on my retirement. She found this arrangement fair, and I concurred with her assessment. After she signed the papers, she expressed a desire to explain how the affair had started and the details of her involvement. To her surprise, I informed her that I was already aware of everything. I revealed that I had been monitoring and listening to her conversations with him through cameras and voice recorders, even showing her where she concealed her MJ. She was taken aback and fell silent. I didn't want to hear any justifications from her as she understood the gravity of her actions. Her tears seemed like an attempt to gain sympathy from me, but I remained resolute, knowing that what's done is done. Edit. It has been 2 weeks since I served my wife with divorce papers, and we have 76 days left for the divorce to be finalized. The house has not been sold yet, but there are 2 strong interests from potential buyers. My soon-to-be ex-wife and I continue to reside in the same house, sleeping in separate bedrooms. My daughter is no longer speaking with my wife, and I'm acting as a mediator, hoping to reconcile their relationship. My sons still maintain contact with their mother but have significantly lost respect for her. I understand that my family will never be the same, and I've come to terms with that reality. Regarding her affair partner, I heard he was released on bail but is still facing court proceedings, and his case remains pending. I believe he may receive a prison sentence exceeding 2 years, hopefully.
Story 3.
Be prepared served as the Boy Scouts' motto. The Scout Code varied, outlining that a Boy Scout should embody traits like reliability, loyalty, helpfulness, friendliness, politeness, kindness, obedience, cheerfulness, thriftiness, bravery, cleanliness, and respectfulness. Surprisingly, it also mentioned naivety, apparent stupidity, idiocy, and trust. Nick had no alternative explanations. Typically, after checking his wife's iPhone email, he refrained from further exploration, a habit she knew well, thus foregoing extra security measures. Being a Boy Scout, he respected others' privacy. However, with Nick's wife departing in a few weeks, he struggled to recall her hotel's name, despite her prior mention, hoping to avoid arguments about his inattentiveness, which had become more frequent. Their impending separation would be their longest since their wedding 5 years ago. Nick contemplated a romantic gesture, like sending flowers to express his affection while she was thousands of miles away in the city of love, Paris. Yet, he knew her affections in Paris would be for Dwayne, her companion on the trip. Upon entering his wife's phone password, their wedding date, Nick found himself perusing one of the non-work-related emails exchanged between Linda and Dwayne over recent weeks. They discussed romantic activities in Paris, including strolls along the Champs-Élysées, moonlit boat rides on the Seine, and passionate nights. Almost as startling as the affair itself was the fact that Linda and Dwayne exchanged messages using their work email accounts. They both should have exercised better judgment. Like Nick, Linda was a lawyer, and Dwayne was a paralegal at her firm. All three had extensive experience in document analysis for major litigation cases, where teams of lawyers and paralegals combed through hundreds of thousands of emails for discovery proceedings. Typically, the narrative revolved around 1 or 2 individuals engaging in affairs, prompting lawyers to assess any impact on the case and strategize damage control. The truth was, Nick's lack of attention when Linda mentioned the trip and hotel name stemmed from a sense of something amiss, honed by his legal experience in detecting deception. He couldn't pinpoint it then, but his instincts signaled trouble. 5 years as a lawyer, Listening to clients and colleagues had sharpened his perception. Something felt off when Linda first mentioned the trip. The arbitration process ahead promised to be dreadfully dull, leaving no time to enjoy the sights of Paris. She mentioned this casually, without even looking at him, and it felt too dismissive. Knowing Paris held a special place in Nick's heart, they often discussed visiting together since Linda had never been. Nick found her response odd, but he didn't anticipate such a dire situation. The email he was now reading felt like a sharp blow to his heart. Dwayne's message from the previous night suggested removing Nick to spend more time together without worry. Linda replied, stating she felt safe with Nick, but admitted to enjoying secret moments with Dwayne. This revelation stung. Nick felt uncertain about his next steps, aside from forwarding all correspondence to himself and printing out the email exchange as evidence, just in case. As an experienced lawyer, his first instinct was to preserve evidence. After securing the emails, Nick began to contemplate his options. He knew he needed to think carefully before taking any action. This analytical approach was what defined him as a lawyer. He was paid for his intellect, not his physical strength. With Linda out for a run and expected back soon, he had limited time to make decisions. Before he could consider his next move, he needed to complete the task of finding a hotel. However, this wasn't for sending flowers. He didn't understand why he needed this information, but he knew it was necessary, perhaps to be near the Eiffel Tower, close to the International Chamber of Commerce, where Linda and Dwayne would be working on their arbitration case. Once he located a suitable hotel, Nick quickly conducted a search on Virginia divorce law. While he remembered some details from the bar exam, he wanted to double-check. Infidelity was grounds for divorce and could impact issues such as alimony and property division. But there were nuances to consider. One defense was if Linda discovered the infidelity and then resumed carnal relations voluntarily. Nick needed to leave the house quickly, avoiding confrontation for now, intending to confront Linda later with a carefully crafted response. He resolved to take control of the situation for the remainder of their marriage, even if it meant acting against the principles of the Boy Scouts. In wartime, as Churchill famously said, truth must be protected by a bodyguard of lies. Nick's lies would serve a greater purpose now, especially since none of them were under oath. He headed to the master bedroom, beginning to pack swiftly. Finishing promptly, he placed his suitcases near the front door. He nearly completed gathering vital documents, bank and credit card statements, 401k and IRA statements, car titles, pay stubs, mortgage, and Linda's recent student loan balance. As he emerged from his basement office, he heard her in the kitchen, deciding to appear worn out and disheveled when facing his wife. With her shoulder-length brown hair pulled back into a ponytail, she looked attractive, though he found her repulsive. In his view, love was already dead. "I'll be going to Paris," he announced with a grim smile. Linda's face drained of color, her blue eyes losing their brightness. "What, Paris, Virginia?" Her initial shock faded quickly. "Sven just called," Nick explained. "We're needed for an insurance case, and we need to prep a witness. We lost the motion to compel, and the judge is furious, throwing the investigation timeline into chaos. I'll be on the road for a few weeks, though I might drop by occasionally." "Poor thing," Linda replied with a fitting expression of concern. "Maybe your company is hiring." "I'd rather join you in Paris," Nick countered, noting concern flicker across her face again. But then she grinned. "Send me your resume. Maybe you have the right experience for us to consider." It was a jest. Linda's law firm ranked higher than Nick's. Perhaps with some guilt, she moved as if to hug him, but Nick retreated to his office before she could close the gap. Visions of striking her resurfaced, and he wasn't sure he could keep them at bay. Heading back upstairs, Linda inquired about his dinner preference. "I won't be able to stay. I'll grab something on my way out. Sven urgently needs me to hit the road," he said, bustling around the kitchen. Linda followed him to the door, a hint of concern in her expression as he grabbed his suitcases and headed out. She leaned in for a goodbye kiss. "Apologies. I think I may have caught a cold this morning. My throat feels sore. It could be allergies, but I don't want you to catch anything." Linda trailed him to the car as he loaded it. "When can I expect you back?" "Probably not until Friday. We're heading to Roanoke after Paris. Then, the following week, we're off to Baltimore." Perhaps growing more paranoid, he thought he could discern the gears turning in her mind as he watched her avert her gaze, as though contemplating how his absence might present unexpected opportunities for her. Waving goodbye, he reversed out of the driveway. He hoped she would simply assume that he was preoccupied with work and irritated by the Saturday call. His acting skills were already stretched thin, but he suspected she was already plotting to invite Dwayne over. Nick drove until he reached a nearby shopping center with a coffee shop. Like many lawyers, he found clarity in putting thoughts to paper. As he finished his coffee, he began jotting down a list of tasks. Pausing for a moment, he realized he had never entertained the idea of reconciliation. That wasn't even on the table. Only retribution was. The question was, to what extent? The ringing of his phone interrupted him. Not recognizing the number, he answered impatiently. "Yes," he said. "Mr. Buford, I'm Sam Granger. Though we haven't met, I'll be direct. I found your number online. I specialize in buying old houses and replacing them with mansions. I understand it's controversial, but people tend to soften when presented with a check." Granger spoke rapidly, leaving Nick little time to react except to note that the house wasn't old. It was cozy. "I'd like to purchase your house to demolish it," Granger continued. "While I'd suggest a shopping center, construction timelines, especially with county permits, are unpredictable. I make my profit by closing deals fast, and I believe I can offer you a very favorable price if you and your wife are interested in selling." Nick struggled to suppress a grin reminiscent of the Grinches as Linda picked out their home shortly before their wedding. Although an aged ranch, it boasted a charming yard bordering a wooded area with a babbling creek. Despite its proximity to major highways, it offered seclusion and tranquility. What truly sold her was the treehouse in the yard opposite the master bedroom window, envisioning it as an ideal space for children. Meanwhile, Nick was drawn to its affordability and the fact that it was only a 20-minute drive from the main subway parking lot, coupled with a 30-minute train ride to work, making the move to the area highly convenient. "Mr. Granger, I'll be absent for the next few days, so access to the property may not be guaranteed. Call me, Sam. I don't require an interior inspection. As mentioned, it's a wreck, and I've already surveyed the exterior. Can we meet Sunday morning?" "Certainly. I'll likely finalize the deal using my wife's power of attorney due to her busy work schedule." "No problem. I'll provide you with the necessary paperwork." Nick made a note of the address and started to envision the plan taking shape. Did Linda feel secure with her Boy Scout? Little did she know that Lord Baden-Powell's scouting principles, stealth, cunning, and self-confidence, served as the basis for his boy's movement skills, akin to military intelligence tactics, including ambushes. She won't anticipate what unfolds until it's too late. But first, reconnaissance. To start, he set his empty coffee cup on the table and headed to the car for privacy. Dialing a number, he asked, "Frank?" when the call was picked up. Frank Barry worked as a private detective during his 5 years in corporate legal work. Nick also made it a priority to do pro bono work to assist disadvantaged individuals with their legal issues. This aligned with his beliefs about leading a meaningful life and provided him with courtroom experience that his regular job typically didn't offer. One of his law school peers suggested that Frank assist with a contentious divorce case involving a stepfather accused of carnally abusing his stepdaughter. Frank's evidence led to the man's release when the police's lackluster response failed, expediting the divorce process. As Nick briefed Frank on what he had uncovered, he queried, "You think your wife will bring him to our bed tonight? Is she truly that arrogant?" "She's become incredibly arrogant. A standout in her law school class. She believes she's infallible. I'll handle it myself. I owe you for your help. The Rivera divorce case brought me significant positive attention. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. Thanks, Frank." Nick added, "Oh, and there's a treehouse in the backyard that you might find useful. Its windows directly face the master bedroom, and she tends to keep the curtains open. It used to bother me, but I've learned to accept whatever arouses her. You can access it by crossing the forest and jumping over the stream after dark. There are no fences or dogs around. A service road on the other side offers parking." "Thank you. If it's okay, I plan to conceal a camera outdoors, aiming it at the front of the house to monitor arrivals and departures." "Excellent. And you're engaging Harry for a divorce, correct? You're seeking a divorce?" "Yes, and yes." "All right, I know Harry's fondness for affidavits and the reporting process. If you're correct, we'll discover the truth soon." Next, Nick phoned Harry. "Is this regarding the law school reunion?" "Nick, I've already received 5 calls about contributing to their fund. No, I need to retain your services. Linda's been unfaithful and I want to pursue legal action." After briefing him, Harry replied, "Come by tomorrow. Although it's Sunday, I still needed to handle some paperwork at the office. We might as well proceed. It seems you've acknowledged that infidelity cannot be tolerated. Frank has already gathered compelling evidence of the affair. The challenge will be negotiating a fair financial settlement. She's also a lawyer at a prominent firm, so she'll have the means to contest and delay. Additionally, colleagues at her firm are advising her. Leave it to me, Nick said. I believe we can resolve this in a civilized manner. So, you're not planning to go all out against her, but understood. Let's see what you propose. His final call required finesse. Hello, Maggie. It's Nick. The silence on the other end was profound. Maggie, it's good to hear from you too, honey. After all these years. What's on your mind, Nick? After all this time, I need your assistance. I thought Linda was your assistant. It's about Linda. She's been up to no good. What a shock. I find it hard to believe. Foolish. Have you noticed that all of this is encapsulated in quotation marks? I can't offer you emotional or carnal support lately. I'm seeing someone else now, and I'm sure he's content. Look, I truly apologize. I regret that our indiscretions tainted our friendship. I also regret allowing Linda to push you out of my life when there was a chance for us to reconcile. But now I need your supportive assistance. What do you need, Nick? He informed her. There was a pause on the line, followed by laughter. I'm in, she said once she had composed herself, though he could still sense the grin in her voice. You always knew how to make me laugh. Thank you, Maggie. Once things settle down, you'll have to introduce me to Mr. Lucky so I can commend him on his excellent choice and invite you both to dinner. Consider it arranged, she replied. He required a place to lay low for a while and strategize. Thus, he booked a room at an extended stay hotel outside the Beltway in Fairfax, distant enough from his and Linda's usual hangouts to avoid detection. After settling in, he went out to grab a bite to eat. Although he wasn't particularly hungry, he knew he needed sustenance in his stomach to handle the drinks he intended to consume. Across the street from the hotel stood a restaurant named El Mariachi. As the hostess seated him in a booth, he noticed the bartender glancing in his direction. The bartender seemed vaguely familiar, but Nick dismissed the thought. At present, he had ample reasons to be concerned. The menu items suggested that the restaurant masqueraded as Mexican cuisine. Many Americans couldn't discern the distinction. He opted for budget-friendly tequila with his meal, anticipating a harsh hangover the next day, considering the discomfort part of the purging process. The waitress returned with a bottle of premium tequila from the top shelf. Catching Nick's gaze, she gestured to the bartender, who nodded in acknowledgement. Nick reciprocated the gesture and poured himself a generous drink. As the bartender resumed tending to other patrons, it took a moment for Nick to recall his identity. He remembered him as one of the spectators at Rivera's divorce trial and the subsequent criminal proceedings, always seated alone in the back row. One day, his client's daughter, Sonia, hugged him, but when Nick inquired about the man, Sonia grew silent, insisting he was just a family friend. Nick dined quietly, jotting notes on a notepad and sipping tequila. After the waitress cleared his table, he visited the restroom, feeling the surroundings sway as if he were aboard a ship. Leaning against the wall for support, he returned to his booth, attempting to maintain composure, only to find the bartender seated across from him. "Senor Nick, good to see you," he greeted, clasping Nick's hand and shaking it vigorously. Nick settled in, awaiting his words. "I never properly thanked you for helping my cousin deal with that scoundrel she was wedded to." Nick tried to downplay his role, but the bartender brushed it off. "He was severely injured in prison. Were you aware?" "I was. They fear he may never walk or eat solid food again." The bartender's slight smile sent a shiver down Nick's spine. "I didn't catch that," Nick remarked. The bartender shrugged. "Yesterday's news. What brings you to El Mariachi solo on a Saturday night? Where's your lovely wife?" Nick met the bartender's gaze. The bartender maintained a smile, not mocking, but knowing. Nick wondered why he posed such an odd question. How did he even know Nick was married? Then, Nick recalled Linda's surprise visit to one of the hearings, where she kissed him afterward. The bartender must have still been in the courtroom. "We're dealing with some issues regarding her," Nick admitted. He saw no need to fabricate or conceal details, such as her involvement with someone else, again met with the bartender's knowing smile. Nick was taken aback and fell silent. "I'm no lawyer, Don Nicholas, but I know that if you want to keep a secret, you shouldn't write it down and leave the paper lying around," the bartender remarked, gesturing to Nick's notebook. It detailed aspects of infidelity, depicted drawings of Dwayne's hypothetical demise, featured the name Linda encircled with a slash, and included a to-do list with the phrase, "burn the bitch." Nick shrugged. Poor operational security, but at least it didn't expose any sensitive customer data. Any man in your predicament should ponder his desires. What do you truly desire, Senor Nick? Apart from wealth, what would be your ultimate vengeance? Nick didn't hesitate. "I want to punch her nose so hard it shatters. and I want to strike her face until both her eyes blacken. She has a stunning face and expressive eyes. I want to obliterate them." The bartender's grin widened, followed by a chuckle and a shake of his head. "My friend, your thinking isn't rational. Those who seek revenge so viciously often end up behind bars. You wouldn't want that. Unless, of course, it happens while you're visiting your clients, right?" He paused, casting a sly glance at Nick, who nodded. "But perhaps I can assist you with something. You aided my cousin with her predicament. She could have sought my help, but for various reasons, she declined. Yet you stepped in and handled it." Nick attempted to interject. Yes, he enlisted Frank to gather evidence, but he left the police to do the legwork. Nick also enlisted a partner from his firm, a former assistant United States attorney, to diplomatically liaise with the prosecutor to ensure proper handling of the criminal case. Nick accompanied his client to ensure she received due respect from the prosecutor. The divorce itself was standard procedure following her husband's conviction. The bartender waved off his objections. "You must recognize that aiding everyday people like my cousin is commendable. On behalf of my family, I am indebted to you. I always repay my debts. I believe you could use some assistance." Nick studied him intently. "I'm afraid I don't recall your name." The bartender's smile morphed into a shark-like grin. "Some folks call me El Diablo, Devil." He nodded. "That's what those who dislike me call me. To my friends, I'm Jose Garcia." Now it was Nick's moment to grin. "What must I do to earn a favor from the devil? Trade my soul?" El Diablo's grin faded. Nick's expression turned serious. "Let's be real, you're a lawyer. You don't have a soul." His grin returned, signaling a jest. "Consider it professional courtesy, Senor Nick. Now just provide me with your address, your wife's name, and her daily routine." "What's your plan?" "I have a few ideas, but ever heard the saying, ignorance is bliss? I think you need to remain blissfully unaware and keep track of your whereabouts over the coming months. Get yourself a disposable phone so we can stay connected. Leave the number here at the bar, and after that, steer clear of this place. It's for the best." Nick briefed El Diablo on hiring a private investigator, his intention to stay put until Linda jetted off to France, and her travel schedule. El Diablo recognized the hotel in Paris but kept its source under wraps. "Just one query, Senor Nick. Is there any hope for reconciliation, forgiveness, mercy? I don't want to hear, 'I've had a change of heart' later on." El Diablo met his gaze squarely. The grin vanished. His demeanor turned grave. Nick held his gaze, took a deep breath, and paused to rein in his emotions. The path ahead was clear. He was a man of simple values, prioritizing trust and loyalty above all else. They had left his marriage. Linda had flicked a switch in his mind, swapping love for loathing. With time and reflection, he knew he'd eventually become indifferent, but that time hadn't arrived yet. "No one," El Diablo eased. "All right, don't stress about a thing." The waitress delivered the bill. El Diablo waved her off, but permitted Nick to tip generously. He also allowed Nick to take a bottle of tequila, but cautioned him to pace himself. A clear mind was essential for the upcoming battle. Somehow, Nick woke up on Sunday morning at a reasonable hour with minimal hangover. He reached Harry's law office at 10 a.m. and found Frank already present. "Apologies, Nick," Frank said. "She definitely had relations with that guy in your bed. He was there 2 hours after you called me and was still present when I departed. This morning we received high-quality footage. I've made you a copy, but you might not want to view it." Harry interjected, "You probably shouldn't." "Don't worry," Nick replied, accepting the DVD from Frank. "Give me the summary." Frank continued, "I climbed into that treehouse just like you instructed, and they were all over each other. I captured clear shots of their faces, and frankly, their entire bodies. It was evident they were engaging in relations. Nonetheless, it seems to be merely physical. They hardly conversed. I'm uncertain if this alters your plans." "No, for how long?" Nick inquired. "They both had remarkable stamina." "Thank you. This only makes me feel worse. Apologies. Anyway, I'm personally acquainted with Linda from your party last year, so I can identify her. We ran a check on this guy's license plates. They belong to Dwayne Martin. We know he's colluding with her. The duration of their involvement remains unclear, but it appears to be compelling evidence. Oh, and we've installed a camera in a nearby tree overlooking the driveway and garage, allowing us to monitor their comings and goings. I'll send you a remote link to the live stream on our secure server. I've discussed this with Harry, and we'll draft a report and supporting affidavit for him to file. Once again, my apologies, dude." Frank exchanged handshakes with Harry and Nick before departing the office. "So, what's the plan?" inquired Harry. "We're filing for divorce on grounds of infidelity, but I don't want to serve her yet," Nick explained. Harry regarded Nick stoically. "Trust me, Harry, those words make my stomach churn. I don't want any foolish moves. I have a feeling things will go smoother than you think," Nick reassured. Harry winced. "Just file this on Monday afternoon before the court office closes. Give me the case number, and I'll handle the rest. But remember, Nick, I'm not versed in criminal law." "Noted. And if you find yourself in trouble, I can't bail you out." "You might be pleasantly surprised," Nick quipped as he exited. His next destination was a meeting with Sam Granger. It proved highly productive, as Nick discovered they could sell the house for over $100,000 more than the mortgage, without real estate agent fees. Linda would be thrilled if she knew. Nick pledged to return promptly with the necessary paperwork to seal the deal. As Nick left Sam's office, he glanced at his phone. No messages or calls. She must still be occupied with Dwayne. Nick seized the moment to call his boss, Sven, and inform him of his urgent need for 2 weeks of vacation, or he would resign. Sven, in a panic, relented, recognizing Nick's vital role in current affairs and their temporary business slowdown. With his plans set in motion, Nick returned to his hotel to tend to his ongoing tasks. By Monday evening, everything was prepared. Linda had left voicemails on Sunday and Monday evenings, to which he chose not to respond, reserving his energy for Tuesday morning. Frank's camera positioned outside the house had provided Nick with insights. Dwayne had spent Monday night there, and based on his prior stay from Sunday evening to Monday morning, he would likely depart around 8 a.m. for work, just before Linda left around 8:30 a.m. At 7 o'clock sharp, Nick strolled through the front door and exclaimed, "Darling, I'm home!" A sudden noise from upstairs caught his attention, and shortly after, Linda descended the stairs in her robe, appearing disheveled and startled. "Honey, what a surprise," she said, attempting to feign cheerfulness but struggling to conceal her unease on the brink of panic. "I thought you wouldn't be here until Friday. You didn't answer my calls." "Apologies," Nick replied cheerfully. "You know how it goes." He pretended not to notice the 2 glasses of wine left in the living room as he made his way to the dining room. Linda lingered in the doorway, pondering her next move and how to prevent him from ascending the stairs, where Dwayne was likely hiding. A knock at the door startled her. "Could you get that, honey?" Nick requested. Meanwhile, he busied himself arranging papers on the dining room table, feigning obliviousness as Linda squared her shoulders and went to answer the door, possibly anticipating the arrival of a bailiff with divorce papers. To her surprise, it was Maggie who entered unannounced, simply greeting them. Linda observed with intrigue as Maggie took a seat at the dining table and opened her suitcase. "Apologies, honey," Nick began, "but I'm uncertain when my next on-air appearance will be. And you know, I can't imagine you embarking on a foreign trip without updating your powers of attorney. You know, just as a precaution in case any financial or medical emergencies arise. Oh, and I had a couple of moments over the weekend and received a tip about refinancing my mortgage at a fantastic rate. Since we'll both be traveling, I thought now would be the opportune time to handle it. I apologize for the urgency," he added, attempting to convey his remorse. "Who's this?" Linda inquired, gesturing towards Maggie once the pulsing in her temples had subsided. "This is Maggie," Nick clarified. Linda visibly relaxed. "Maggie is a notary," Nick elaborated. "You're my Boy Scout, always prepared," she remarked with a grin as she took a seat, though her eyes remained cautious. "It's just my nature, honey," he said, handing Linda a pen and arranging the papers in front of her. "The flags with arrows indicate where to sign. Feel free to review the documents if you wish." "I trust you," Linda replied with a broad smile, promptly signing all the papers before her. Nick silently prayed that she would comply, as his fate depended on it. But as they say, fortune favors the bold. As Linda signed each document, Nick passed them to Maggie, who notarized them. "Mrs. Buford, do you have a photo ID?" Maggie inquired. Linda rose from the table to retrieve her purse. A brief exchange of glances occurred between Maggie and Nick, both struggling to suppress laughter. Linda placed her driver's license on the table. Maggie snapped a photo with her phone and recorded the details in her notary journal. Linda offered coffee, but both Nick and Maggie politely declined. As Maggie finalized the certification of the documents in her ledger, and Nick organized everything into separate folders, Linda's gaze remained expectant, anticipating Nick's next move. Strategizing her next steps, Maggie departed, tidying up her belongings and offering Nick a smile when Linda's attention was elsewhere. Seizing the moment, Nick informed Linda that he had a conference call to conduct and retreated to his basement office to do so. Linda visibly relaxed, knowing she now had time to discreetly escort Dwayne out and erase any trace of him before Nick resurfaced from his sanctuary. Nick descended to the basement, allowing Linda to maintain the illusion that she was still deceiving him. Pretending not to hear the heavy footsteps retreating up the stairs as Dwayne made his escape, or the garage door opening for Dwayne's departure, Nick continued with his charade. However, upon hearing the shower running in the master bathroom, Nick swiftly gathered his belongings, exited through the basement door, and drove off in silence, leaving his unsuspecting wife behind. 2 hours later, after a hearty breakfast at the diner, Nick found himself in Harry's office. Harry appeared taken aback. "So you're saying you had your wife sign Form CC-1106, confirming the divorce filing and relinquishing future service of process and notice of any proceedings?" "That's correct. The properly certified form is right here." "And you're also telling me that you coerced your wife, a seasoned lawyer, into signing a property settlement agreement transferring all proceeds from the sale of your home and its contents, along with cars and any jewelry she owns, granting you full control over her personal belongings, and allowing both of you to retain your respective retirement accounts, with no alimony from you to her, despite her higher income?" "Indeed. She always displayed a very generous demeanor." Harry scrutinized Nick and redirected his focus to the papers on his desk. "And you also procured her signature on an affidavit wherein she confesses to infidelity, acknowledging her lover's presence in the marital bedroom at the time of signing, following a night of closeness the previous evening. Are you suggesting her affidavit genuinely supports this account? According to the email, she mentions staying with her lover due to his proficiency. Is this the narrative you wish to present, counselor?" Nick maintained a neutral expression, struggling to contain his emotions. "Let's refrain from insults. The documents are self-explanatory." Harry glanced at the papers, then at Nick, almost smiling before suppressing it and swiveling in his chair. "Damn it. I'll accept the case. You're a respected member of the bar and an old friend from law school. How was I to know you orchestrated all this? I thought it was legitimate." "Your Honor, I'm utterly bewildered. I was blindsided by my client's breach of trust. If anyone's license should be revoked, it's Nicholas A. Buford's, Your Honor." "Do you see my stance on this, Nick? I'll pursue it to the bitter end if need be. Will the notary affirm Linda's signature on these documents?" "Yes, she will." "Can she testify to Linda's careful review of the papers?" "I wouldn't wish to preempt or sway any testimony, but given Linda's legal expertise, I trust she scrutinized the documents diligently." "I'm confident the notary will attest to witnessing Linda Buford review and sign each document. As for her comprehension of their contents, I cannot offer an opinion." "All right then," said Harry. "I'll process all this today, along with Frank's affidavit and report, complete with photos and a DVD. I'll attempt to remove it from the electronic record temporarily. We don't want this to remain in the public eye, do we?" "No," replied Nick. "Linda's departing for Paris in just over 2 weeks. The longer we keep it concealed, the better." "Do you have any connections in district court? Remember Seth?" asked Harry. "He was a student a year junior to us. Struggling to secure a position at a law firm, he's now serving as a law clerk in district court to bolster his resume. He could expedite the process, but if the judge insists on live testimony, it could jeopardize everything. Linda must decide not to contest this for some reason, should she become aware. If things take a turn for the worse, I may need to resign as your attorney." "Fair enough. Someday you can fill me in on the whole ordeal, but not now." Over the subsequent 2 weeks, Nick kept Linda at a distance. He sent her texts at irregular intervals, citing his busy schedule, and only sporadically answered her calls. As time passed, her calls dwindled. "You've spooked her," Frank informed him by week's end. "According to our surveillance footage, Dwayne hasn't been at the house since you surprised them on Tuesday morning. I can't ascertain if they rendezvous at his place during the week or engage in their activities at the office, but it's evident they're avoiding home. I'll keep you posted if anything changes." The only alteration was Nick's discreet return to the house upon learning Linda had departed to gather the financial documents he deemed necessary. He also finalized a contract with Sam Granger to sell the house, with the sale set to close during Linda's initial week in France. During evenings, Nick frequented the gym, read in his spare time, and pondered how he ended up with such a chaotic life at 30. He informed Sven of his need for a few more weeks of rest, to which Sven reluctantly agreed. "She's back to enjoying herself with him in the house," Frank informed him on Saturday, a week before Linda's Paris trip. "Thanks for the heads up," Nick replied. Though indifferent, he knew he'd rather incinerate the sheets than sell them when he abandoned the house. By then, Nick had already viewed the video Frank provided, revealing Dwayne's allure. Dwayne, a few years younger, was a gym regular known for pre-weight training mirror rituals. Otherwise unremarkable, Dwayne embodied a superficial ideal Nick could have done without. Before he knew it, Linda embarked on her long-awaited Paris trip. One of Frank's associates shadowed her to the airport, waiting until her departure for Europe. Upon receiving the news, Nick entered the house, consolidated Linda's clothes in the living room, and packed his belongings. The next day, movers boxed Linda's clothing and sent it to storage, while Nick's possessions were moved to the apartment he secured. With Sam Granger's assistance, a proficient house liquidator, Nick easily sold the furniture. Once the house was emptied, Nick took a final stroll before executing his ultimate task. He meticulously gathered the wedding photographs, album, and Linda's wedding dress, placing them in the patio fire pit beneath the treehouse. After adding lighter fluid and igniting a match, he watched as the memories turned to ashes. After the blaze, Nick was satisfied to find that the video captured ample detail. Each photo added to the pit depicted vivid memories of their time together. The following day, Nick finalized the sale of their family home using his wife's power of attorney, which she should have reviewed. With a separate financial power of attorney, Nick managed to deposit the sale proceeds, access his personal account, acting on behalf of his wife, and close joint accounts 3 days later. However, during Linda's initial week in France, a construction crew demolished the house, clearing debris swiftly before commencing site preparation. Unfortunately, the tree, once a playground favorite for children, had to be removed. A gazebo now stood in its place. Regrettably, construction halted abruptly as the cherished home site transitioned into an empty square of land. It appeared there were issues with the permitting process. Nick and a law school friend employed in the county permitting department were confident the issue would resolve upon Linda's return from France, once the appropriate forms were received and approved. Throughout this period, Nick ignored all attempts at communication from Linda, eschewing calls, texts, emails, and voicemails, despite outreach from her friends and relatives. Nick replied swiftly, informing them he was occupied and traveling, primarily to deter them from driving by the house and encountering him. El Diablo reached out on Nick's prepaid cell phone, mentioning that Linda and Dwayne appeared strained and unhealthy, hinting at possible suspicions. When Nick inquired how he obtained this information, El Diablo simply stated his wide network of connections, even across Europe. He then proposed returning Linda's wedding and engagement rings, to which Nick declined. El Diablo asked if someone else could purchase them, to which Nick adamantly refused, but eventually relented, suggesting he might know a potential buyer. 2 days before Linda's scheduled return from Paris, Nick found himself in Harry's office. "I have no idea how this happened, but here's the divorce decree. It's much quicker than usual for such cases," Harry remarked, with Seth remaining silent. "I don't inquire or speculate. Consider yourself fortunate and celebrate your newfound single status. Here's the copy I'll be sending to your ex-wife. I'm sure she'll be pleased." As Nick approached his car outside Harry's office, an unfamiliar number rang his phone. However, upon answering, he recognized El Diablo's voice. "Nick, you should take a vacation immediately. Go somewhere crowded where people know you and can vouch for your presence." With that, El Diablo disconnected the call. Nick realized it had been ages since he saw his college friends in New York. Fortunately, his schedule was open for the next few days, so he embarked on a trip the same day. He visited several exhibitions, explored numerous museums, and socialized over lunches, coffees, and dinners with different groups of friends, covering most expenses with his credit card. He also tipped generously at his hotel to ensure recognition from all the staff. While there, he express mailed a DVD copy depicting him burning Linda's wedding dress and album to her parents' house. Late Sunday evening, after savoring coffee and pastries in Little Italy and Manhattan, Nick's phone rang. It was his father-in-law. "Nick, where are you? Linda is in a frenzy. She's in the hospital?" "Yes, what's the matter?" This was becoming intriguing. She returned from her trip on Friday, but she and her colleague were apparently abducted from the airport. They emerged this morning, both under the influence of medications. Her colleague was severely smacking, and Linda... Here, his father-in-law's voice faltered. "What about Linda?" "She woke up covered in tattoos from head to toe, tattoos with dreadful inscriptions, and as soon as she woke and saw this, a masked man entered and struck her nose, breaking it. Then he inflicted 2 black eyes with 2 more blows." "Impressive," Nick pondered. It was the perfect ending. He wouldn't mind if Linda realized his betrayal, just as she betrayed him in their marriage. It would be worth a soul if he possessed one. "I'm sorry to hear that. I'm out of town presently. What do you need me to do?" Nick sensed surprise on the other end of the line. "You're her husband. She's your wife." "Not anymore. We divorced. The court finalized it last week. She's cheating on me with the man she's traveling with." "What? How? Here? What's unclear?" Nick knew he was being excessively cruel now, but he didn't care. "I have a video. I can send you a copy of her engaging in bed acts. Not with me, if you'd like to know." Silence followed on the other end. Nick wondered if his father-in-law had suffered a heart attack. "We're done with her, so you'll have to bring her home. She's not my responsibility now." "You did it," his father-in-law exclaimed. I've been in New York since Wednesday, celebrating my divorce. Look, I understand you're upset, and I hope Linda recovers soon, but I don't think we have anything else to say to each other." He ended the call. At that instant, Nick realized the urban stress had become overwhelming. He emailed Sven, bluntly stating that he and the firm could go to hell. Respectfully, a quick online search revealed an REI store in Soho, prompting Nick to equip himself with new hiking and camping gear. Since Linda never enjoyed hiking, this was an opportunity for Nick to reconnect with his intelligence background. The hotel kindly stored his luggage for a reasonable fee, allowing him to venture into the Adirondack Mountains to immerse himself in nature until things settled down. Fortunately, he had his passport in case he decided to visit Canada. As it turned out, he did. For the next 8 weeks, Nick mostly ignored his phone. Initially, the barrage of messages, resembling frantic screams and tears, made it seem like someone had hijacked his ex-wife's phone. Unable to sift through them all, he listened to only a couple before deleting the rest, along with numerous bizarre emails. Clearly, her account must have been compromised. Finding time to read through it all seemed impossible. Nick hoped the troubled woman behind the messages would seek the help she urgently needed. 8 weeks later, Nick met Frank and Harry for drinks. "Just to clarify," Harry began once they were settled, "I terminated our attorney-client relationship right after I provided you with the divorce decree. I notified you via registered mail. Perhaps you haven't checked your email yet?" Nick admitted he hadn't. "It's quite a storm, buddy," remarked Harry. Frank added, "More like a typhoon. I'm all for it. Plenty of havoc." Harry finished his bourbon and ordered another. Frank began detailing the events. "So, on Monday morning, the former Mrs. Buford arrived at her previous residence with her parents. We never got around to removing the external camera. Upon seeing the empty lot, she experienced a complete breakdown, falling to her knees in tears and assuming the fetal position. It culminated in her kicking and screaming like a toddler at the mall by late afternoon. Later, when a work crew arrived, she had another outburst, despite having raccoon eyes from the slapings and a Band-Aid on her broken nose." Harry then took up the narrative. "That afternoon, she, along with a couple of attorneys from her prestigious firm, stormed into my humble office in a threatening manner. Since they had no appointment, I kept them waiting for 25 minutes. I ensured my Glock was loaded and placed on my desk. Thank goodness for Virginia laws. After the wait, they all yelled at me, discussing urgent motions, bar complaints, and contempt proceedings. I must confess, it was hard not to notice the tattoos all over her face, vividly inked in red and blue for visibility. Once I managed to regain focus," Harry continued, "I inquired about the exact issue causing their aggression, asking if there were any false statements. They paused, exchanging glances. So I questioned them about the controversy surrounding your ex-wife's alleged infidelity. They all affirmed it. I then played a video I had prepared while they waited for Mrs. Buford, showing her engaging in bed activity with someone other than her husband in the marital bed. Clearly, they hadn't thoroughly reviewed the entire case file yet," Harry continued. "Then they all just appeared perplexed. Linda started screaming that you didn't even give her a chance to explain herself, and I responded saying you weren't concerned about the reason, you just took action. She regained composure and began arguing that she never consented to you selling the house. She questioned the rationale behind burning her wedding dress, photos, and albums, as they were her personal belongings. I presented her with copies of the powers of attorney, one specifically granting authorization to sell the house. I showed her the property settlement agreement, granting you discretion to dispose of her personal belongings, and reminded her she was fortunate to retain her clothing. I inquired whether she disputed her signature on the documents. While she admitted it was hers, she insisted she hadn't agreed to the contents. Then I questioned if her defense rested on her failure to read what she signed. I prompted her to envision the scrutiny during cross-examination if she challenged anything in court. She fell silent at this point. I also referenced the affidavit she signed, acknowledging her lover's presence upstairs at the time of signing, and asked if this was accurate. She then lost consciousness. Her companions attempted to revive her, but I had already dialed emergency. Despite their insistence, she refused to accompany them to the hospital. However, she began shouting about tattoos and her boyfriend being assaulted, Harry added. I clarified that these matters were unrelated to you. As far as I knew, you were out of town anyway. I suggested that perhaps Dwayne had provoked a husband, either of another woman he was involved with or someone who felt Linda was taking him away. I informed them they could address any potential criminal case with the Fairfax Police Department. Then things took an interesting turn, Harry continued. They persisted in discussing filing a motion for reconsideration and similar actions. That's when I informed them that earlier that morning I had received an anonymous email containing links to several videos of Linda and Dwayne in your bed, engaging in bed activities before their trip to Paris. The message threatened to distribute the videos to everyone Linda knew, asserting that you, Nick, were unaware and powerless to prevent it. They claimed to be allies, citing past assistance from you and pledged to shield you. They warned of sending the videos that day if she didn't drop the matter. Are you aware of this? I was out of town, Harry. Afterward, they departed. I haven't heard from them since. And there were no incidents at the courthouse. Frank resumed. They likely contacted the police because a couple of detectives arrived. They requested copies of the videos and filed a report. Then their interest waned. Neither Linda nor Dwayne could provide details. They only recalled getting into a taxi at the airport, then waking up in the hospital. Linda discovered herself in a seedy hotel room, having been assaulted before seeking medical attention. The room charges, along with room service and minibar expenses, were billed to her credit card. This time, Nick mentioned that the hotel manager had informed him that New York police had investigated his stay, and his New York acquaintances had been approached. However, they all confirmed his active presence in the city. Word on the street, Harry mentioned, is that your ex is holed up in her parents' basement getting laser tattoo removal. The snag is they charge by the square inch, and she's inked from head to toe. It's bound to rack up tens of thousands of dollars, and yet the marks will linger indefinitely. It's regrettable, Nick remarked. Harry fixed his gaze on Nick. Frank simply pressed his lips together to stifle laughter. What about your paramour? Heard he took quite a smacking, Harry queried. He's in for extensive physical therapy, suffered some head trauma, multiple concussions. He might struggle to land another paralegal gig. Their firm cut ties with them both. Seems their relationship soured during the trip, and somehow it adversely impacted the entire arbitration. They were ill-prepared, short on documents, unready objections, problematic witnesses. They lost on the merits. Client wasn't pleased. Firm had to make some personnel sacrifices to salvage future work. One of these days, Nick, you'll have to divulge how you handled all this, Frank suggested. Handle what? I'm as innocent as a Boy Scout. Maggie waited in the car as Nick disembarked. I'm a bit peeved. No one bothered to inquire if I actually notarized the documents or if she read them before signing. I was prepared to testify that I witnessed her scrutinizing each one, but I couldn't gauge how much time she spent on it. Let's hash this out over dinner. I owe you and your boyfriend for aiding me in regaining my freedom. Maggie turned to him, peering over her sunglasses as Nick backed out of the parking spot. There's no guy, you dummy! Nick braked suddenly, meeting her gaze. Seriously? Absolutely. Now zip it and drive me home so you can commence the rather lengthy and grueling process of making amends. Sure thing, Nick grinned. But first, I need to swing by the post office. For what? Sending a card to an old friend, Nick replied, retrieving it from the glove compartment. It bore the Boy Scouts emblem. I'll ask her. Does she feel safe now? Safe?
Story 4.
The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the driveway as Henry Mitchell guided his weathered pickup truck to a stop. His calloused hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white from tension he hadn't realized he was holding. 15 months of active deployment had changed him, honed his instincts to razor sharpness. And those instincts were now screaming that something was wrong, that he scanned his surroundings with a methodical precision that had kept him alive in combat. The modest two-story colonial house stood silent, its white paint showing signs of neglect. The flower beds Maya had once tended with such pride were overrun with weeds, the roses withering from lack of care. It wasn't just neglect. It was abandonment. His last video call with Lily played in his mind as he reached for his military duffel. 2 weeks ago, she'd seemed different, subdued. He'd attributed it to typical preteen moodiness. But now, everything okay at home, princess? He'd asked. Yes, Daddy, she'd replied, but her eyes had darted away from the camera. Mom's been really busy lately. The gravel crunched beneath his boots as he approached the front door. Mrs. Anderson, their elderly neighbor, was watching from her porch next door. She raised her hand in greeting, but there was something apologetic in her wave that made Henry's chest tighten. His key slid into the lock with familiar resistance, but before he could turn it, the door swung open. Daddy, for a heartbeat. Henry saw the flash of pure joy in his daughter's eyes, that unconditional love he'd carried with him through every dark night in hostile territory. But something was wrong. Lily's smile didn't reach her eyes, and there was a shadow there that hadn't existed in their previous calls. Hey, sweetheart, he said softly, dropping his bag to catch her in an embrace. At 12, she was taller now, but still so small in his arms. As he held her, he felt a slight tremor run through her body. When he pulled back to look at her face, his combat-trained eyes caught what others might miss. The bruise was artfully concealed, mostly hidden by her long dark hair, but Henry spotted it immediately, a yellowish discoloration along her jawline that had no business being there. His daughter, his little girl, was trying to hide it with the way she held her head, but 15 months of identifying threats had taught Henry to see what others wanted to keep hidden. Where's your mother? He asked, keeping his voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in his head. Years of military training had taught him to control his reactions, to analyze before acting. She's not home, Lily answered, her voice barely above a whisper. She said she had errands to run. Henry nodded, stepping into the house. The interior felt wrong, sterile, and unfamiliar. The family photos that had once lined the hallway were gone, replaced by generic art prints he didn't recognize. The air felt stale, devoid of the home-cooked meals that had once welcomed him back. Did I in the living room? More changes jumped out at him. The comfortable old armchair where he used to read to Lily was replaced by a sleek, modern piece that looked expensive and uninviting. Shopping bags from high-end stores were scattered across the floor, their logos speaking of money that shouldn't have been spent. Let's sit down, he said, guiding Lily to the couch. I want to hear about everything I've missed. Lily perched on the edge of the cushion, her hands fidgeting in her lap. She'd always been reserved, taking after him more than her mother in that regard. But this was different. The quiet confidence she'd inherited from him was gone, replaced by something that looked too much like fear. School's okay, she started, but her voice cracked. I got all A's this semester. That's my girl, Henry said warmly, trying to coax out the daughter he remembered. He noticed how she sat slightly turned, protecting her right side. Another red flag his training wouldn't let him ignore. But something's bothering you, isn't it, Lily? You know you can tell me anything. The tears came suddenly, silent at first, then building into quiet sobs that shook her small frame. Henry moved closer, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. She flinched, a reaction that sent ice through his veins. He'd seen that flinch before, in villages they'd liberated, in faces that had seen too much violence. Daddy, she choked out, I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you, but she said he'd hurt me worse if I did. Henry's mind shifted into tactical mode, the same clarity he'd experienced in combat taking over. Who said that, sweetheart? He asked, though a terrible suspicion was already forming. Who would hurt you? Lily's words came in broken gasps between sobs, each one hitting him like enemy fire. Mom, she brought him here. I wasn't supposed to be home, but I felt sick and came back early from Jenny's house. They were in your bedroom. Henry maintained his composure as Lily continued, each word building a picture he would give anything to erase. I was so scared, Daddy. I didn't know what to do. He was kissing her, and they didn't hear me at first, but then I dropped my backpack and... She touched the bruise on her jaw, the gesture making her seem even smaller. He got so angry. He hit me and pushed me against the wall. Mom just stood there. She didn't stop him. And after he left, she told me if I ever told you, he'd come back and kill me. The rage that surged through Henry was unlike anything he'd experienced in combat. This was different, primal, and personal. But his training kicked in, helping him compartmentalize the anger, storing it away for later use. Right now, his daughter needed his strength, not his fury. "Listen to me very carefully, Lily," he said, taking her trembling hands in his. His voice was steady, the same tone he'd used to calm younger soldiers in their first firefight. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing. And I promise you, no one will ever hurt you again. Do you understand?" She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. The gesture was so childlike, so innocent, that it made his heart ache. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, dreading the answer, but needing to understand the full scope of the situation. "Since a few months after you left," Lily whispered. "Mom started going out more, saying she needed time for herself. Then one day, she brought him here. I heard them laughing about you, about how you'd never know." The casual cruelty of it, not just the betrayal, but the mockery, struck him like a physical blow. But he kept his voice gentle, gathering intelligence like he'd been trained to do. "Does he come here often?" Lily nodded, her words coming faster now, as if a dam had broken. "Almost every weekend. Sometimes during the week, too. Mom gives him money. I've seen her take it from your account. She buys him expensive things. New clothes, watches. She said it was her right, that you owed her for leaving." The sound of a car pulling into the driveway cut through their conversation. Lily stiffened, panic flashing across her face. Henry squeezed her hand reassuringly before standing to face whatever came through that door. He'd faced down enemies in combat. He could face this through the window. He watched Maya step out of a car he didn't recognize, a new luxury model that definitely wasn't in their budget. She was wearing clothes he'd never seen before, designer labels he couldn't afford on his military salary. His tactical mind cataloged the changes: new haircut, expensive jewelry, no wedding ring. The woman who walked through that door was a stranger wearing his wife's face. Maya breezed through the front door, designer shopping bags dangling from her arms, her high heels clicking against the hardwood floors. When she spotted Henry, her step faltered for just a fraction of a second, a tell that his combat-trained eyes didn't miss. Then the smile appeared, practiced and hollow, like a mask sliding into place. "Henry, you're home early. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." She set her bags down, the logos of exclusive boutiques facing outward like small declarations of war. Her movement toward him was graceful but calculated, arms opening for an embrace he didn't meet. He remained still, studying her with the same intensity he'd used to assess threats in the field. The woman before him bore little resemblance to the person he'd married 13 years ago. Her hair was expertly styled, her makeup perfect, her nails freshly manicured. Everything about her screamed of money they didn't have, or rather, money they shouldn't have had. "Funny," he said, his voice controlled and even. "I called last week to tell you I'd be home today. Must have slipped your mind." Maya's smile flickered, like a faulty light bulb threatening to go dark. "Oh, did you? I've been so busy lately managing everything here on my own. You know how it is?" She gestured vaguely at their surroundings, at the new furniture and art that had replaced their family memories. "I do know how it is," Henry replied, his eyes moving deliberately to the shopping bags. "Looks like you've been managing just fine." Something shifted in Maya's expression, a hardness replacing the facade of welcome. The mask slipped further, revealing glimpses of the stranger beneath. "Well, someone had to keep things running while you were gone, playing soldier." The casual dismissal of his service, of the months spent in hostile territory, of the brothers he'd lost, of the nightmares he still carried, would have wounded him once. Now it only confirmed what he already knew. The woman he'd loved was gone, if she'd ever truly existed at all. "Lily, sweetheart," he said, not taking his eyes off Maya. "Why don't you go up to your room for a bit? I need to talk to your mother." Lily hesitated, looking between her parents with obvious fear. The sound of her quiet footsteps retreating upstairs echoed in the tense silence. "I think we need to discuss what's been happening while I was away," Henry said quietly, each word measured and precise. Maya had already turned her attention to her shopping bags, pulling out expensive clothes with practiced indifference. "Nothing's been happening. I've been taking care of our daughter and maintaining our home, which is more than I can say for you." "Is that what you call it?" Henry's voice remained low, but there was steel beneath the words. Taking care of our daughter? Is that what you were doing when you let your lover assault her? Maya's hands froze over a silk blouse, her knuckles whitening around the fabric. Then she straightened, turning to face him with a defiance that bordered on contempt. She shouldn't have been here. She was supposed to be at her friend's house. The casual way she said it, as if Lily being in her own home was the problem, made Henry's blood boil. But he maintained his composure, years of military discipline serving him well. So, you're not even going to deny it? Why should I? Maya's laugh was bitter, edged with something ugly. You're never here, Henry. What did you expect? That I'd just sit around waiting for you like some loyal dog? I have needs. I have wants. And John, he understands that. John, Henry repeated the name, committing it to memory like he would an enemy combatant's position. The man who hit our 12-year-old daughter. The man you're stealing my money to support. Our money, Maya corrected, her voice sharp as a blade. And what I do with it is my business. You've been gone for 15 months, Henry. Did you think everything would just pause while you were away playing hero? Playing hero? Henry took a step forward, and Maya instinctively backed up, her designer heel catching on one of her shopping bags. I was serving my country, protecting people, including you and Lily. But it seems you needed protection from something closer to home. Maya's face hardened, her features settling into lines of cold calculation. Don't you dare judge me. You have no idea what it's been like here. And if Lily had kept her mouth shut like she was told. If you finish that sentence, Henry cut her off, his voice deadly quiet. You might not like what happens next. For the first time, real fear flickered across Maya's face. She recovered quickly, but Henry had seen it, the realization that she didn't know this version of her husband, couldn't predict what he might do. The man who had left for deployment wasn't the same one standing before her now. Are you threatening me? She asked, trying to sound confident, but unable to hide the tremor in her voice. No, Henry replied. I'm promising you that if you ever endanger our daughter again, there will be consequences. Now, I'm going to ask you some questions, and you're going to answer them honestly. Where does John live? Maya's chin lifted in defiance. I'm not telling you anything about him. You will, Henry said simply. Because right now, the only thing keeping me from going to the police about the assault on Lily is the fact that it would traumatize her further to go through that process. But if you don't cooperate, I might decide it's worth it. Maya's facade cracked like thin ice under too much weight. You wouldn't. It would ruin everything. Your career, our reputation. Try me. She must have seen something in his eyes, something that spoke of the changes 15 months of combat had wrought, because she sank into one of her new designer chairs, suddenly looking deflated. He has an apartment downtown, the Miller Building on 7th Street. But Henry, you can't. He's dangerous. He has connections. So do I, Henry replied coldly. How much of our money have you given him? Maya looked away, her fingers tracing the expensive fabric of her new clothes. I don't know exactly. Maybe 50,000 over the past year. The number hit him like a physical blow, but he didn't let it show. When he spoke, his voice was steady, methodical. You're going to sign over your access to all our accounts. Today. And you're going to tell me everything you know about John. His full name, his habits, his background. Everything. And if I refuse, then I'll file for divorce immediately, citing adultery and child endangerment. I'll get full custody of Lily, and you'll get nothing. Your choice. Maya stared at him for a long moment, then laughed, a harsh, brittle sound that held no humor. You know what? Do it. File for divorce. You think you can control everything, just like you always have. But you have no idea what's really going on. John and I, we've been planning this for months. We knew you'd be back eventually, trying to play the righteous husband and father. Go ahead, try to stop us. You'll regret it. The threat hung in the air between them like smoke after an explosion. Henry studied his wife, this stranger wearing Maya's face, and felt something inside him shift. The last lingering doubt about what needed to be done vanished like morning mist under a harsh sun. I'm going to check on our daughter, he said quietly. When I come back down, I expect you to be ready to have a serious discussion about how we move forward. And Maya, he paused at the foot of the stairs, his voice carrying the weight of experience earned in combat. If you try to contact John while I'm upstairs, remember I've spent the last 15 months learning how to know when someone's lying to me. Don't test that training. As he climbed the stairs, Henry could hear Maya's manicured nails already tapping at her phone screen. Let her make her calls, he thought. Let her run to her lover. They had no idea what they'd awakened. Not the soldier, but the father. And a father protecting his child was more dangerous than any enemy he'd faced in combat. Henry found Lily sitting cross-legged on her bed, clutching the stuffed penguin he'd sent her from his last deployment. The sight of her so young, so vulnerable, crystallized everything in his mind. In combat, he learned that sometimes retreat wasn't surrender. It was tactical repositioning for a stronger counterattack. "Did you hear any of that?" he asked gently. Sitting beside her on the purple comforter she'd had since she was 8, she nodded, her fingers working nervously at the penguin's worn fabric. "Some of it. Mom's not sorry, is she?" "No, sweetheart, she's not." Henry chose his words carefully, remembering how his commanding officer had once told him that truth, delivered properly, was the strongest armor. "But that's not your fault. None of this is your fault. What's going to happen now?" Her voice trembled, and Henry saw the same fear he'd witnessed in civilians caught in war zones, the uncertainty of what came next. He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. The familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo grounded him, reminding him of what was at stake. "Now, we make sure you're safe. I'm going to take care of everything. I just need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Lily nodded against his chest. "I always trust you, Daddy." "Good girl. I want you to pack a bag, enough clothes for a few days. We're going to stay at a hotel tonight." He stood, military efficiency taking over. "Pack warm clothes, your school books, and anything important you don't want to leave behind." As Lily began gathering her things, Henry surveyed her room with tactical awareness. The window faced the backyard, potential escape route if needed. The tree outside could provide cover. Old habits died hard, and right now, those habits might save them. "What about Mr. Waddles?" Lily asked, holding up the penguin. "He's definitely coming with us." Henry managed a smile, though his mind was already mapping out the next several moves in this new kind of warfare. "Pack your laptop too. We might need it." While Lily packed, Henry quickly moved to the master bedroom. The room felt tainted now, knowing what had happened here. He grabbed his go bag from the closet, the one he always kept ready, a habit from his service days. Inside were emergency cash, spare ID documents, and a burner phone he'd never told Maya about. That a quick search of Maya's dresser revealed what he was looking for: a small notebook hidden beneath her lingerie. Inside were handwritten notes, account numbers, and an address he committed to memory. Maya had always been careless with important information, assuming no one would look. Voices drifted up from downstairs. Maya on the phone, her tone urgent and hushed. Henry's enhanced hearing, honed by months of listening for enemy movement, caught fragments of the conversation. "He's back early? No, I don't think he suspects everything. Just stay away for now. I'll handle him." Henry's jaw tightened. She was already lying. He'd made it clear he knew about John, yet she was still trying to manipulate the situation. Moving quietly, he returned to Lily's room. "Ready, sweetheart?" She nodded, shouldering her backpack. The sight of her bruised face in the fading daylight hardened his resolve. In combat, he'd learned to channel anger into focused action. That lesson would serve him well now. "Remember what I taught you about situational awareness?" he asked as they moved toward the stairs. "Yes. Always know where the exits are. Always have a backup plan." "Good girl." We're going to walk downstairs calmly. If Mom tries to stop us, you keep walking to the truck. Don't stop. Don't argue. Just like we practiced when I taught you emergency procedures. Understand? Lily's chin lifted slightly, a gesture that reminded him of himself. "Yes, Daddy." They descended the stairs to find Maya still on her phone, pacing the living room. She ended the call abruptly when she saw them, her eyes narrowing at their packed bags. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded, moving to block the door. "Lily and I are leaving for a few days," Henry stated calmly, positioning himself between his daughter and his wife. "When we return, things will be different." "You can't take her," Maya protested, her voice rising. "I'm her mother. You have no right. You lost the right to call yourself that when you chose your lover over her safety." Henry's voice was ice, the same tone he'd used when confronting enemy combatants. We'll be back when I've decided how to handle this situation. Until then, I suggest you think very carefully about your next moves. Because I promise you, Maya, you have no idea what I'm capable of. Maya's face contorted with rage. Is that a threat? Because John is the least of your concerns right now. Henry cut her off, guiding Lily toward the door. You might want to remind him that assaulting a minor is a federal offense. And Maya, he paused, letting her see the cold determination in his eyes. The next time he raises a hand to my daughter will be the last time he raises a hand to anyone. They walked to the truck, Henry's body angled to shield Lily from Maya's view. He helped her into the passenger seat, then walked around to the driver's side. Every movement measured and deliberate. He started the engine. He caught Maya in the rearview mirror, already back on her phone. Let her call John. Let them plot and scheme. They thought they were dealing with a simple soldier, someone they could intimidate and control. Where are we going? Lily asked quietly as they pulled away from the only home she'd ever known. First, we're going to stop at the bank, Henry replied, his mind already several steps ahead. Then we're going to find a safe place to stay while I make some arrangements. The sun was setting as they drove, casting long shadows across the road ahead. But Henry wasn't afraid of shadows anymore. He'd learned in war that darkness was often where justice was best served. And for his daughter, he would serve it without mercy or hesitation. In the passenger seat, Lily hugged Mr. Waddles close, her small face reflecting both fear and trust. Henry reached over and squeezed her hand gently. Everything's going to be okay, sweetheart. I promise. And he meant it, because while Maya and John thought they were scheming, they had no idea they were already at war. Henry had spent 15 months in combat, learning to identify threats, analyze weaknesses, and eliminate dangers to those under his protection now. He would put those skills to use protecting the one person who mattered most. The game had begun, and Maya and John had no idea they were already losing. The Golden Crest Hotel stood 6 stories tall, its weathered brick exterior betraying its age, but not its security features. Henry had chosen it with the same precision he'd used to select patrol routes in combat, analyzing sight lines, access points, and defensive positions. The retired Marine working security, James Cooper, had recognized Henry's military bearing immediately. "Third floor gives you the best visibility," Cooper had said during check-in, his eyes scanning the perimeter even as he processed their paperwork. "Room 312 has a clear view of both parking lots and the street, less exposed than the higher floors." Now, as pre-dawn light filtered through the room's heavy curtains, Henry sat at the small desk, his laptop casting a blue glow across his face. The room was exactly what he needed. 2 queen beds, a kitchenette, and, most importantly, a direct line of sight to all potential approach vectors. His burner phone buzzed. Tom Reynolds, his former squad mate, had come through faster than expected. "You sure about this intel?" Tom's gravelly voice carried the weight of experience. "Because once we start down this road, I'm sure," Henry cut in, his eyes scanning the information on his screen. "Need everything you can get me on John Marshall. Lives at the Miller Building on 7th Street. Has a history of violence." The pause on the other end was telling. "The same John Marshall who runs with Michael Davies' crew?" Henry's fingers stilled over the keyboard. "You know him?" "Know of him. He's Davies' muscle in the loan sharking operation." "Real piece of work." Tom's voice hardened. 3 assault charges in the last 5 years, all mysteriously dropped. The kind of charges that disappear when you've got friends in high places. "Tell me everything." "It's not pretty." Started as a bouncer at the Red Door. Worked his way up through intimidation and violence. Now he's Davies' go-to guy for problem solving. Word is when loans go bad, Marshall makes house calls. Henry's jaw tightened. "And Maya got involved with him?" "From what I'm seeing, it's been going on for months. Credit card receipts, show them at high-end restaurants, hotels. Your wife's got expensive taste, brother. She's not my wife anymore." Henry's voice was ice. "Not after what she let him do to Lily." Another pause. "What did he do?" "Put his hands on my 12-year-old daughter. Left bruises." "And Maya?" Henry's grip on the phone threatened to crack the case. "Maya told Lily he'd kill her if she told me." "Jesus Christ." Tom's breath hissed through the line. "Give me 2 hours. I'll have everything. His daily routine, his associates, his weaknesses. And Henry? Whatever you're planning, I've got your six. Appreciate it. Henry ended the call, his military mind already processing the new information. John wasn't just some random affair partner. He was connected, dangerous. The kind of man who thought money and connections made him untouchable. The kind of man who'd never faced a real opponent, that a soft whimper from the adjacent bed drew his attention. Lily was having another nightmare, her small form curled tightly around Mr. Waddles. Henry moved to her side, his steps silent from years of combat training. He gently stroked her hair until the trembling subsided. The bruise on her jaw was darker now, its mottled colors a roadmap of violence that no child should have to bear. His phone buzzed, another message from Maya. Stop being childish. Come home, and we can talk about this like adults. Delete. Block. In the past 12 hours, she'd cycled through threats, manipulation, and fake concern. Each message only confirmed what he already knew. She was incapable of real remorse. The laptop chimed. Tom's first intelligence package had arrived. Henry's eyes narrowed as he read through the attached files. John Marshall, age 38. 6 feet 2 inches, 210 pounds. Multiple arrests, but no convictions. Known associate of several local crime figures. Regular at the Red Door nightclub every Thursday night. A creature of habit who followed the same routine most days. Daddy. Lily's voice was small in the dimness. Are you still awake? Right here, sweetheart. He moved to sit on the edge of her bed, noting how she automatically shifted to keep the bruised side of her face away from him. Bad dream? She nodded, clutching Mr. Waddles tighter. I saw him again. In our house. He was... Her voice cracked. He was hurting you this time. Listen to me. Henry took her small hands in his, remembering how he'd once taught her to throw a baseball, to ride a bike. How they ended up here. No one is going to hurt either of us. You know why? Why? Because I've spent 15 years learning how to protect people. In the military, they taught us that the best defense is being smarter than your enemy. And right now, that's exactly what we're doing. Being smart. But Mom said he has friends. Important friends? So do I. Henry smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Remember Staff Sergeant Tom? The one who sent you that desert rose from Baghdad. Lily nodded. The pretty pink one in the glass case? That's right. Well, Tom's helping us now. And he's just one of many friends I have. People who understand that protecting family is the most important thing in the world. His phone buzzed again. Not Maya this time, but a different number. He answered on the first ring. Got something for you. Tom said without preamble. Marshall's got a regular meet at the Red Door tonight. Every Thursday like clockwork. Sits at the same table, drinks the same overpriced scotch. Who's his usual company? That's the interesting part. Your wife's been showing up there for months now. They're not exactly subtle about it. But here's what caught my attention. Marshall owns property. An old warehouse off Industrial Drive. Inherited it from his father's business. Tell me about the warehouse. 3 stories, mostly empty. He uses it for private meetings, the kind of cops don't know about. It's isolated, minimal traffic, no working cameras in the area. And get this, there's an old office on the top floor. That's where he takes his special guests. A plan began forming in Henry's mind. Any chance of getting eyes inside the Red Door? Already handled. You've got a job interview with Frank Miller, the owner, at 4 today. Seems they're short a bouncer. Fast work. That's not all, Tom continued. Marshall's got patterns. Predictable ones. After the club, he likes to show off his warehouse to new associates. Real private guy about his business dealings. Perfect. Henry's military mind was already formulating scenarios, analyzing angles. What's his protection like? Carries a Glock 19, right side holster. Usually has backup nearby, but not at the warehouse. That's his private playground. Good to know. One more thing. How's his relationship with Davies? Solid. Tom's laugh was dark. Far from it. Word is Marshall's been skimming. Getting sloppy. Davies is already looking for a replacement, just waiting for the right moment. Interesting. Very interesting. Thanks, Tom. Henry ended the call and checked the time. 5:30 a.m. Lily would need to be up for school soon. He'd enrolled her in a new district yesterday, Wanting to maintain some normalcy while keeping her away from Maya's influence, his phone buzzed again. Maya, Jean wants to talk to you. Man to man. Clear the air. Henry's laugh was cold and humorless. They were playing right into his hands, and they didn't even know it. Daddy. Lily was sitting up now, her eyes too old for her young face. Are we ever going home? Henry moved to sit beside her, choosing his words carefully. Home isn't a place, sweetheart. It's where we're together and safe. Right now, that's here. But soon, we'll find a new place. A better place. What about Mom? Your mother made her choices. Henry kept his voice gentle, but firm. Sometimes people show us who they really are, and we have to believe them. No matter how much it hurts. Lily leaned against him, her small frame still trembling slightly. I'm scared. I know. But being scared is okay. It means you're smart enough to understand danger. And you know what else? What? Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave. It means you keep going anyway, just like you did when you told me the truth. That was very brave. She was quiet for a long moment. Are you scared sometimes, Daddy? Yes. He kissed the top of her head, but not of men like John Marshall. I'm only scared of failing the people I love. That's why we're going to be smart about this. No mistakes. As Lily drifted back to sleep, Henry returned to his laptop. The pieces were falling into place. John thought himself invincible, protected by his connections and Maya's manipulation. But Henry had learned in combat that every target had vulnerabilities. You just had to know where to look, and John Marshall's vulnerabilities were becoming clearer by the minute. The Red Door nightclub pulsed with bass-heavy music as Henry walked through the employee entrance at exactly 3:45 p.m. The heavy metal door closed behind him with a solid thunk that reminded him of compound gates in combat zones. Frank Miller's office was at the end of a narrow hallway, past stacked liquor boxes and between security camera blind spots that Henry automatically cataloged. Frank looked exactly as Tom had described. Heavy-set, balding, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He barely glanced at the resume Tom had created. Military background? Frank asked, shuffling through papers on his cluttered desk. 3 tours. Special operations. Frank's eyes narrowed. Tom Reynolds vouches for you. Says you're solid in a crisis. Tom and I served together. Yeah. Where? Kandahar. 2019. Henry kept his voice neutral. Bad winter. Frank nodded slowly. Tom never talks about that winter. He stamped some paperwork with more force than necessary. Look, I'll be straight with you. Thursday nights get rough here. Certain customers think their connections make them untouchable. Need someone who can handle delicate situations without creating bigger problems. I understand delicate situations. Bet you do. Frank leaned back. Here's the deal. You start tonight. Regular shifts are Thursday through Sunday, but I need coverage tonight specifically. Previous guy had an unfortunate accident. Henry caught the hesitation. John Marshall's accident? Frank's face went carefully blank. You know about Marshall? Know enough to stay out of his way. Smart man. Frank relaxed slightly. Marshall's a regular. He gets certain courtesies. Long as he behaves, we don't have problems. When he doesn't, Frank gestured at a framed license on the wall. Keeps me in business, if you understand me. I understand protection money. Good. Start at 8. Black shirt, black pants. Keep the peace, but don't make waves with Marshall's crew. They tip well when they're happy. Henry stood. Anything else I should know? Yeah. Frank's voice dropped. Marshall's got a new lady friend. Wife of some military guy. If they show up together, you don't see anything. You don't hear anything. Far as you're concerned, they don't exist. Understood? Henry spent the next few hours preparing. He changed into black tactical pants and a fitted black t-shirt that wouldn't restrict movement. The outfit looked civilian enough, but the pants had reinforced knees and hidden pockets that could prove useful to a T-730. He called Lily's new school, confirming she'd been picked up by Mrs. Cooper, the security guard's wife, who'd agreed to watch her for the evening. She's doing fine, Mrs. Cooper assured him. Working on homework now. James is teaching her chess after dinner. Thank you for this. No thanks needed. James told me what happened. We take care of our own. By 8 o'clock, Henry was in position at the Red Door, learning the layout from another bouncer named Marcus. Back exits the hot spot, Marcus explained, pointing out camera positions. Dealers try to use it for quick transactions. Management looks the other way for certain customers, but we stop the obvious ones. Regular trouble spots? VIP section, usually. Thursdays when Marshall holds court. His boys get rowdy sometimes, but we don't intervene unless he signals us. Henry memorized the floor plan, noting sight lines and potential choke points. The main bar offered a clear view of Marshall's preferred table. The emergency exit behind it hadn't been up to code in years. Its alarm disabled for convenient access at T9 sharp. John Marshall walked in like he owned the place. Henry observed from his post, cataloging details. 6'2", muscular but running to fat. Moved like a boxer past his prime. Right hand dominant, weapon visible as a slight bulge under his designer jacket. 2 bodyguards following at a respectful distance. That's him, Marcus muttered. Remember what Frank said? Marshall claimed his usual table, ordering scotch with a casual arrogance that spoke of complete confidence in his position. 10 minutes later, Maya arrived that Henry's military training was the only thing that kept his expression neutral. His wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, wore a dress that probably cost more than his monthly salary. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, playing her part perfectly. "He'll show," Maya was saying as Henry moved past their table. Just another faceless security guard. Henry's too self-righteous not to. John's laugh was ugly. "And when he does, we'll explain how things work now. If he's smart, he'll take the deal. And if he's not smart, then he'll learn why people in this town don't cross me." John's hand moved possessively to Maya's thigh. "Besides, your military hero isn't built for civilian problems. Men like him, they're all rules and regulations. They break easy in the real world." Maya's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just remember what we discussed. No permanent damage. Worried about your meal ticket? Worried about complications. Henry has friends in the military. We need to be smart about this." John's face darkened. "You questioning my methods?" "No, baby." Maya's voice turned soothing. "Just thinking ahead. Like you taught me." Henry continued his rounds, gathering intelligence. Their arrogance made them careless. They discussed plans openly, assuming no one would dare listen too closely. WY11. John was on his 4th scotch, his movements becoming loose and aggressive. He'd already shoved one waiter for spilling a drink. The incident smoothed over with a handful of hundreds and Frank's careful intervention. "He's not coming," John finally growled, his words slightly slurred. "Guess your husband's smarter than you thought." Maya's face showed real fear for the first time. "He'll come around. He has to. The custody hearing. No more games." John stood, swaying slightly. "I'm done playing nice. Tomorrow, we do this my way." "What does that mean?" John grabbed her arm, hard enough to make her wince. "It means your husband's going to learn what happens to people who don't show me proper respect. Maybe we start with another visit to his precious daughter." Henry's hands clenched at his sides, but his face remained impassive. He watched them leave, noting how John's hand kept straying to his right side where the Glock was hidden. He waited 15 minutes, then radioed Frank. "Family emergency. Need to cut out early." "No problem. See you tomorrow?" "Count on it." Henry followed them at a safe distance, his motorcycle silent in the night. As Tom had predicted, they headed straight for the warehouse on Industrial Drive. He parked his bike out of sight and moved in on foot. Years of combat training making him invisible in the shadows, the warehouse was perfect, isolated, soundproof, with multiple entry points. Henry spent 30 minutes observing, mapping the layout, noting the cameras that hadn't worked in years. He watched John and Maya leave together in John's car, her laughter carrying across the empty lot. When he returned to the hotel, Lily was still awake despite the late hour, sitting at the small table with Mr. Waddles while James Cooper taught her chess. "Knight to E4, James was saying. "Always protect your king." "Is that what Daddy did in the army?" Lily asked. "Protect people? That's exactly what your dad did." James looked up as Henry entered. "And he was damn good at it." After the Coopers left, Lily hugged Henry tightly. "Did you catch the bad guys?" "Not yet, sweetheart." He stroked her hair. "But soon. Very soon." Once Lily was asleep, Henry made one final call. "Still got my 6. He asked when Tom answered. "Always. Everything's set." Almost. Need you to deliver a message tomorrow. Make sure John gets an anonymous tip about a business opportunity. Tell him there's a buyer interested in his warehouse. Big money, cash deal. He'll suspect a trap? No, he won't. Because Maya's going to convince him it's legitimate. She just doesn't know it yet. Tom was quiet for a moment. You're sure about this? He threatened Lily again tonight. Talked about paying her another visit. Henry's voice was cold steel. Some lines you don't cross. Understood. What time? 9 p.m. And Tom? Make sure the tip mentions coming alone. Say the buyer insists on complete privacy. Copy that. Watch your back, brother. Henry ended the call and looked at his sleeping daughter. In combat, he'd learned that the most dangerous enemies were often the ones who thought they held all the cards. John and Maya were about to learn that lesson the hard way tomorrow. Everything would change. And neither of them would see it coming until it was too late. Dawn broke over the city as Henry finished his final sweep of the warehouse perimeter. The industrial district was silent at this hour, perfect for what he had planned. He'd spent the early morning hours mapping every approach, every exit, every potential variable that could affect tonight's operation. His phone vibrated. Tom. Message delivered, Tom reported. Used one of Davy's old runners to pass the tip. Kid made it convincing. Said he overheard a big developer talking about buying up properties in the area. How did Marshall react? Hook said deep. He called 3 different contacts trying to verify the developer's identity. Getting desperate for cash since Davies started watching the books closer. Henry smiled coldly. And Maya? Just like you predicted. She called Marshall 10 minutes ago, pushing hard for the meeting. Seems she's been doing some creative accounting herself. Needs a big score to cover her tracks. Time to apply pressure then. Henry dialed Maya's number from his burner phone, putting it on speaker so Tom could hear. She answered on the first ring. Henry? Where are you? Somewhere safe. With our daughter. His voice was carefully neutral. The daughter your boyfriend threatened to hurt again? John didn't mean. I heard him last night, Maya. At the club. Heard everything. A sharp intake of breath. You were there? I was. Heard him talk about paying Lily another visit. Heard you try to negotiate how much damage he could do to me. You don't understand. Maya's voice took on the wheedling tone he'd come to recognize as pure manipulation. John's just frustrated. If you just meet with him. Oh, I plan to. Henry let ice creep into his words. Very soon. But first, I made some calls this morning. Interesting things in your banking history, Maya. Things the IRS might want to know about. You're bluffing. The transfers to offshore accounts. The creative bookkeeping at your office. Did you think I wouldn't find out? That your boyfriend's connections would protect you forever. Silence on the line. Then, what do you want? Tell John to take the warehouse deal. 9 p.m. tonight. Alone. How did you? I know everything, Maya. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal. Now you have a choice. Make sure John shows up alone tonight, or I start making phone calls tomorrow morning. He ended the call, looking at Tom. She'll push him to do it? Tom nodded. She's desperate now. But brother, you're playing a dangerous game. Marshall's unstable when he's cornered. Counting on it. Henry pulled up the warehouse blueprints on his tablet. Walk me through the setup one more time. For the next hour, they refined the plan. Every detail had to be perfect. One mistake could be fatal. When Henry returned to the hotel, Lily was awake, working on homework at the small table. She looked up as he entered, her eyes searching his face. You've been gone a long time, she said quietly. Had some things to take care of. He sat across from her, noting how the bruise on her jaw was finally starting to fade. How's the math coming along? It's okay. She hesitated, then asked, Are you going to hurt him? Henry studied his daughter's face, seeing the conflict there. Why do you ask that? Because. She struggled with the words. Because sometimes I want you to. Is that bad? No, sweetheart. He reached across the table, taking her small hand in his. It's not bad to want people who hurt you to face consequences. But I want you to understand something very important. Everything I do, every action I take, is about protecting you. Not about revenge. What's the difference? Revenge is about making yourself feel better. Protection is about making sure the threat can never harm anyone again. He squeezed her hand gently. I learned that in the military, we don't fight because we hate what's in front of us. We fight to protect what's behind us. Lily nodded slowly. Like in chess? Mr. Cooper says, sometimes you have to sacrifice pieces to protect the king. Similarly, yes. But in this case, we're not sacrificing anything. We're making sure the people who hurt you can never do it again. He released her hand. Now, how about some lunch before your afternoon classes? After dropping Lily at school, Henry met Tom at their backup location, a small garage owned by another former squad mate. Equipment's ready, Tom reported, opening a heavy duffel bag. All untraceable. Henry inspected the contents with practiced efficiency. Everything he'd need to ensure tonight went exactly as planned. Maya called again, Tom added. She's been pushing Marshall hard about the warehouse deal, playing it like she's looking out for his interests, but letting slip about Davies watching his accounts. Good. The more pressure he feels, the more mistakes he'll make. Henry checked his watch. Time to set up the final piece. They drove to the red door, arriving well before opening. Frank was waiting in his office, looking nervous. This better work, he said as Henry laid out the plan. Marshall finds out I helped. He won't, Henry assured him. You're just doing your job, reporting suspicious activity. And tomorrow, you'll have one less problem customer to worry about. Frank nodded slowly. His behavior has been getting worse. Last week, he put one of my waitresses in the hospital. Paid her off, but he shrugged. Maybe it's time someone dealt with him. As evening approached, Henry made his final preparations. Each step had been planned with military precision. The warehouse had been prepared. The pieces were in position. Now it was just a matter of timing. His phone buzzed with a message from Maya. He's going to the meeting. Alone. Perfect. Henry called Mrs. Cooper to check on Lily's after-school arrangements. Everything was set there, too. His daughter would be safe and far away from what was about to happen. One last thing, Tom said as they did their final equipment check. You sure about this? Once it starts, he threatened my daughter, Tom. Twice. Some lines you don't cross. Tom nodded grimly. All right then, I've got Overwatch from the north position. Radio check at 20:45 hours. Henry drove to his predetermined position near the warehouse, settling into wait. In combat, he'd learned that the moments before an operation were often the most dangerous, when doubt could creep in, when second thoughts could get you killed, but there were no doubts now. John Marshall had made his choices, had chosen to hurt a child, to threaten further violence. Tonight, he would learn that some threats shouldn't be made unless you're prepared to face the consequences. His phone buzzed one final time. Maya again. It's done. He's going alone. Now, keep your end of the deal. Henry didn't bother responding. In a few hours, Maya would learn that her manipulations had played right into his hands. That every move she and John had made had been anticipated, planned for, and turned against them. The sun was setting as Henry made his final preparations. Soon, John Marshall would arrive at his warehouse, expecting to make a deal. Instead, he would face something he'd never encountered before. A man who couldn't be bought, couldn't be threatened, and wouldn't stop until the job was done. That it was time to end this. The warehouse district lay silent under the gathering darkness, its abandoned buildings casting long shadows across empty streets. From his position on the adjacent rooftop, Henry watched through his tactical scope as John Marshall's Mercedes pulled up precisely at 9. The expensive car looked out of place among the deteriorating structures, just like its owner. Targets on sight. Tom's voice crackled through the encrypted radio, moving exactly as predicted. No backup visible within half-a-mile radius. Maya's location? Still at the red door, making quite a show of getting noticed. 3 witnesses have already seen her arguing with the bartender about her tab. Henry allowed himself a cold smile. She always did love being the center of attention. You sure about this timeline? Tom's voice carried a hint of concern. Once it starts, it has to be tonight. Henry tracked John's movement through the scope. Davy's accountant made the final transfers this morning. By tomorrow, John will know his overseas accounts are empty. How'd you manage that? Maya's agreed. She kept detailed records of every account, thinking she could use them as leverage. Didn't realize she was building the perfect paper trail. Through the scope, Henry watched John approach the warehouse's side entrance, key card in hand. The man moved with artificial confidence, but years of combat experience let Henry read the tension in his shoulders. the way his head kept swiveling to check his surroundings. He's spooked, Tom observed, like a rabbit that knows there's a wolf nearby. Good. Fear makes people sloppy. Henry checked his equipment one final time. Radio silence from here. You know the signals. Copy that. Oh. And Henry? Tom paused. Remember what we talked about. Clean and quick. No time for personal satisfaction. Henry didn't respond. He moved through the shadows like a ghost, each step placed with the precision that had kept him alive through 3 combat tours. The warehouse's layout was burned into his memory after days of reconnaissance. Every creaking floorboard, every blind corner, every possible angle of approach had been cataloged and accounted for that John's footsteps echoed through the empty space as he climbed to the 3rd floor. Henry tracked his movement by sound alone, noting how the steps grew more hesitant with each floor. By the time John reached his office, his breathing was audible, quick, and shallow, respirations that spoke of growing fear. Hello. John's voice carried a tremor he couldn't quite hide. I'm here about the property deal. Thompson Development sent me. Henry let the silence stretch, psychological pressure building with each passing second. He'd learned in combat that fear was often the most effective weapon, not fear of what was happening, but fear of what might happen next. Look, John called out, anger now mixing with the fear. I don't have time for games. Either show yourself or what? Henry stepped from the shadows, his voice deadly quiet. You'll hurt someone? Maybe a 12-year-old girl. John spun, hand reaching for his Glock, but Henry was already inside his guard. One precise strike sent the weapon skittering across the floor into the darkness. Mitchell. Recognition dawned in John's eyes, followed by something close to panic. How did you? This is private property. Amazing what you can learn about someone when they think they're untouchable. Henry's voice remained calm, almost conversational. Their routines, their weaknesses, their desperate need for money to cover what they've been stealing from their boss. John backed up, trying to maintain distance, his expensive shoes scuffing against the dusty floor. You don't understand what you're dealing with. I've got connections. With Davies? Henry smiled, though it never reached his eyes. The same Davies who's been auditing your accounts? Who knows you've been skimming profits for months? He took a measured step forward. The same Davies who's already looking for your replacement? That's a lie. Is it? Maybe you should ask Maya about those overseas transfers. The one she helped you hide. Another step. Or about the evidence she's been gathering. Insurance, she called it, in case you ever turned on her. Confusion flickered across John's face. Maya wouldn't. She knows better than to. She gave me everything. Henry kept his voice level, watching doubt creep into John's expression. Every transaction, every secret meeting, every detail about your operation that Davies might find interesting. You're bluffing. But John's voice lacked conviction. Maya knows what would happen if she betrayed me. Does she? The same way my daughter knew what would happen if she told me about walking in on you. Henry's mask of calm cracked slightly. About how you put your hands on her? About how her own mother stood there and watched? John's face twisted into an ugly sneer, bravado returning as he sensed a weakness to exploit. The little bitch should have kept her mouth shut, just like her mother when I... The rest of his sentence was cut off by Henry's first strike, a precisely targeted blow that shattered John's nose. The bigger man staggered back, blood spraying across his expensive suit. That's the only free shot you get, Henry said quietly. For touching my daughter. John charged with a roar, leading with a wild haymaker that Henry easily slipped. Combat training took over each movement, economical, each strike targeted to vital points. John had street fighting experience, but he'd never faced someone with Henry's level of training. I'll kill you. John swung again, his technique getting sloppier as panic set in. I'll kill you, and then I'll pay your daughter another visit. Henry's response was surgical, a combination that collapsed John's knee, followed by a strike to the solar plexus that left him gasping on the floor. Get up. Henry's voice was ice. You're so tough when it comes to threatening children. Let's see how tough you are with someone who can fight back. John struggled to his feet, spitting blood. You're dead. You hear me? When Davies finds out, Davies already knows. Henry produced a small recording device. Every conversation you and Maya had at the Red Door. Every threat. Every admission of stealing from his organization. Right now, he's getting a very interesting email about his trusted lieutenant. The last remnants of color drained from John's face. No, you're lying. The same way you lied about having his approval for your side operations? For using his connections to cover up your assault on my daughter. Henry advanced slowly. The same way Maya lied about helping you skim money, thinking you'd take care of her? Maya? John laughed, a wet, desperate sound. That bitch has been playing both of us. She's been siphoning money for months, setting up her escape. She never cared about either of us. I know. Henry's smile was predatory. That's why she's at the Red Door right now, creating her alibi for when they find you. Real fear bloomed in John's eyes. Find me? In your warehouse, with evidence of your embezzlement, with records of your attacks on innocent people, with proof that you've been working against Davy's interests. Henry gestured at the office around them. Maybe you got careless. Maybe someone found out and confronted you. Maybe you decided to run, but something went wrong. John made one last desperate lunge for where his gun had fallen. Henry's response was immediate and final, a combination of strikes learned in close-quarters combat training that left the larger man unconscious on the floor, working quickly. Henry placed the fabricated evidence. Maya's fingerprints were already in place from her previous visits. The confession note in her handwriting, carefully forged from documents Tom had acquired, would point investigators in specific directions. When he finished, he made the anonymous call to the police, disguising his voice as he reported suspicious activity at the warehouse. Then he called Tom. It's done. Start the clock. Clean? Tom asked. Clean. Evidence is placed. Her fingerprints are fresh from yesterday's visit. The note will look like she wrote it in panic after things went wrong. And the money trail? Davy's accountant confirmed the transfers are untraceable. By morning, everyone will think John tried to run with Maya's help, but something went wrong. A tragic accident during a lover's quarrel. Copy that. I've got eyes on Maya at the club. She's playing her part perfectly, making sure everyone sees her there, acting normal. Henry smiled coldly. She always did think she was smarter than everyone else. Time she learned different. As he melted away into the shadows, Henry thought about Lily, safe with the Coopers. Everything he'd done, every calculated move, every careful manipulation had been for her. To ensure she would never have to look over her shoulder again, in combat. He'd learned that victory sometimes required sacrifice. But this hadn't been a sacrifice. This had been justice. Detective Rachel Martinez arrived at the Red Door just as Maya was ordering her fourth martini. The detective noted how Maya's hands trembled slightly as she lifted the glass, how her carefully maintained composure showed hairline cracks around the edges. Mrs. Mitchell. Martinez approached the bar, her badge glinting under the low lights. I need you to come with me. Maya's eyes widened with practiced innocence. Is something wrong, detective? There's been an incident at your friend Mr. Marshall's warehouse. Martinez kept her voice neutral, watching Maya's reaction. We need to ask you some questions. John. Maya's hand flew to her throat in a gesture that might have seemed genuine to someone who hadn't interviewed thousands of suspects. But I've been here all evening. Ask anyone. We will. Martinez nodded to her partner, who was already talking to the bartender. Right now, I need you to come downtown. At the precinct, Maya sat in the interview room, her designer dress out of place against the stark institutional furniture. Detective Martinez let her wait, building pressure through silence, a technique Henry had suggested when he'd reluctantly given his statement hours earlier. Start at the beginning, Martinez said when she finally entered, placing a file on the table. How long have you known John Marshall? We're just friends, Maya replied automatically. Business associates, really? Through my work at the investment firm. Associates who spent 3 nights a week at the Golden Gate Hotel. Martinez slid photographs across the table, surveillance shots from the hotel security cameras. Associates who made large cash transfers to offshore accounts? Color drained from Maya's face. I can explain. Please do. Explain the transfers. The hotel meetings. The threatening text to your daughter when she caught you together. Lily? Maya's mask slipped slightly. What does she have to do with this? She gave us a very detailed statement about walking in on you and Mr. Marshall. About what happened afterward, Martinez's voice hardened. About the bruises, she's lying. She's just angry because Maya stopped, realizing too late what she'd revealed. Because what, Mrs. Mitchell? Because she caught you with your lover? Because he assaulted her and you helped cover it up? I want a lawyer. Probably wise. Martinez opened the file, especially given what we found at the warehouse. Want to explain this? She slid out a handwritten note, the one Henry had carefully prepared using Maya's stolen stationery and forged handwriting. Maya's eyes widened as she read. John Davies knows about the money. About everything. We need to move fast. Meet me at the warehouse tonight. Bring the account documents. If you try to run without me, I'll tell Davies everything. That don't make me regret choosing you over my family. Damn, that's not I didn't. Maya's composure cracked further. This is a forgery. Our handwriting expert disagrees. As do your fingerprints all over the office. As does the security footage of you entering the warehouse yesterday afternoon. Maya's lawyer arrived, then a sharp-suited man who immediately tried to end the interview. But the evidence kept mounting. Bank records showed systematic transfers to accounts that had been emptied hours before John's death. Hotel security footage showed Maya and John plotting together. And most damning of all, Davies' organization had provided documentation of John's embezzlement, along with Maya's involvement. Henry watched it all unfold from a careful distance, playing the role of the concerned but estranged husband. He gave statements about Maya's recent strange behavior, about finding out about the affair, about taking Lily to a hotel for her safety. I just can't believe it. He told Detective Martinez his performance perfect. I knew about the affair, but murder? Maya's manipulative, but I never thought. People surprise you, Martinez replied, studying him. Especially when money's involved. The evidence suggests she helped Marshall embezzle millions, then eliminated him when he threatened to expose her. What about Lily? Will she have to testify? No need. We have enough without putting her through that. The DA's office is confident Mrs. Mitchell's looking at 20 to life. The trial was swift and devastating. Maya's carefully crafted image crumbled under the weight of evidence. Her own testimony did more harm than good. Her attempts to shift blame only highlighted her lack of remorse. Tom sat beside Henry in the courtroom as the verdict was read. Guilty on all counts. Maya's scream echoed through the courtroom. This is a lie. Henry, tell them what really happened. But Henry only watched, his face impassive, as they led her away. In her designer suit and handcuffs, she looked smaller somehow, less substantial, as if her true nature was finally visible to everyone. You okay? Tom asked quietly as they left the courthouse. I'm thinking about Lily. Henry's voice was distant. About how Maya stood there and watched while he hurt her. About how she was going to let it happen again. She'll never hurt anyone again. No, Henry agreed. She won't. Later that night, he sat with Lily in their new apartment, helping her with homework. She'd been doing better since Maya's arrest, sleeping through the night, smiling more easily. Dad? She looked up from her math book. Is Mom really going to be in prison forever? For a very long time. Henry chose his words carefully. She made choices, sweetheart. Bad choices that hurt people. Now she has to face the consequences. Like when you said, sometimes the hardest battle is living with what you've done. Henry smiled, remembering that conversation from his deployment days. Exactly like that. Your mother chose John over you. Chose money over family. Those kinds of choices have consequences. I used to think it was my fault. Lily's voice was small. For telling you what happened. Listen to me. Henry turned her to face him. Nothing about this was your fault. You did exactly right telling me the truth. Sometimes people we love turn out to be different than we thought. Doesn't mean we did anything wrong. Are you really sure she can't hurt us anymore? Absolutely sure. Henry pulled her close. The evidence is ironclad. Every transfer, every meeting, every thread at all points to her eliminating John to cover her crimes. No one will ever be able to prove different. As Lily worked on her homework, Henry's phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Davies' organization is satisfied. Case closed at their end. You're clear? Henry deleted the message. Everything had worked exactly as planned. Maya's own patterns of deception, her careful documentation of her affair with John, her attempts to create alibis, all of it had been turned against her. She played her part perfectly, never realizing she was acting in a script he'd written. The sun was setting outside their new apartment, casting long shadows across the city. But for the first time since coming home, the shadows didn't feel threatening. They felt like justice. The prison visiting room was a study in institutional gray. Its reinforced glass barrier, a physical representation of the walls Maya had built between herself and her family. 3 weeks into her life sentence, the orange jumpsuit had already begun to erase her carefully maintained image. Her designer clothes and perfect makeup were replaced by institutional plainness and dark circles under her eyes. Henry sat across from her, noting how prison had stripped away her artifice. The manipulative mask she'd worn for so long was cracking, revealing the desperation beneath. He picked up the visitor's phone, watching her do the same with trembling hands. "Why?" Maya demanded immediately, her voice brittle. "Why did you do this to me?" "You know why." Henry's voice remained calm, almost gentle, the same tone he'd used when explaining difficult truths to Lily. "You threatened our daughter. You chose him over her safety." "I never. It wasn't like that." Maya's composure cracked, her voice rising until a guard glanced their way. "John was going to take care of us. Give us the life we deserved." "The life you deserved." Henry leaned forward, his eyes hard. "You let him assault our 12-year-old daughter. You threatened her to keep your secret. And when I came home, you were going to let him hurt her again." "I didn't." "That's not." "I know everything, Maya. Every plan, every scheme, every dollar you stole, thinking you could run away with him." Henry's smile was cold. "But you want to know the funny part? He was playing you too. Those overseas accounts you thought were your escape fund, he'd already emptied them." Maya's face went pale. "No, you're lying. The same way you lied about protecting Lily, about loving our family, about everything." Henry's voice took on an edge. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I wouldn't notice the bruises on our daughter's face? It was one time. She shouldn't have been there." "Stop." Henry's command cut through her excuses. "You don't get to justify it. Not now. Not ever. You stood there and watched him hurt her. Then you threatened her to protect him." Maya's hands pressed against the glass. "Henry, please. You don't understand. I was trapped. John said he would." "Would what? Hurt you? Like he hurt Lily?" Henry's laugh was without humor. "You weren't trapped, Maya. You were greedy. You wanted his money, his lifestyle. You didn't care who got hurt along the way." "That's not true. I loved him. The money? Because it certainly wasn't your family." Henry pulled out a small notebook, her notebook, the one he'd found in her dresser. "Your own words, Maya. Every transaction, every meeting, every plan to take the money and run, leaving Lily behind." Maya stared at the notebook, recognition dawning in her eyes. "Where did you get that?" "The same place I got everything else." "You were so careful documenting your affair, your financial schemes. So proud of manipulating everyone." Henry's smile was predatory. "Never realizing you were building the perfect case against yourself." Understanding began to dawn on Maya's face. "You planned this. All of it. I learned a lot in the military, Maya. About patience. About strategy. About how to make the enemy defeat themselves." "The warehouse." Maya's voice was barely a whisper. "The evidence? Perfect, wasn't it? Your fingerprints, your handwriting, your documented connection to John's criminal activities. Even Davy's organization believes you eliminated John to cover your tracks." "I'll tell them the truth." Maya's voice rose desperately. "I'll tell them what you did. Who will believe you? The unfaithful wife who helped her lover assault a child? Who stole money and planned to abandon her family?" Henry shook his head. "Every piece of evidence points to you. Every witness confirms your guilt. You're exactly where you deserve to be." "Henry, please." Maya's mask shattered completely, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I'll do anything." "Like you said sorry to Lily? After letting John hit her?" Henry stood, his voice turning to ice. "You're going to spend a long time in here, Maya. Years to think about your choices. About how you chose money over your daughter's safety. About how your greed destroyed everything. You can't leave me here. I'm still her mother. No. Henry's voice was final. You lost the right to call yourself that the moment you chose him over her. Goodbye, Maya. He hung up the phone and turned away, ignoring her pounding on the glass, her screams muffled by the barrier. The guard nodded to him as he left, a knowing look between men who understood justice outside the prison. Lily was waiting in the car with Mrs. Cooper. The spring sun caught her face as she looked up, and Henry saw something there he hadn't seen in months. Peace. Is it really over? She asked quietly as he got in. Yes, sweetheart. He started the engine. It's over. Your mother can never hurt you again. What happens now? Now we start fresh. Henry pulled out onto the highway, leaving the prison behind. I've got a new job offer. Different city, better opportunities. How do you feel about learning to surf? Lily's eyes lit up. Really? Like in California? San Diego. Henry smiled. Tom's got a security consulting firm there. Says they need someone with my experience. Good schools in the area, too. Can Mr. Waddles learn to surf, too? Henry laughed a real laugh, the kind he hadn't experienced since before his deployment. We'll get him his own little surfboard. As they drove, Henry glanced in the rearview mirror. Maya would spend the next 20 years minimum behind bars, branded as a murderer and a thief. John's death would be a warning to others who thought themselves above consequences. And his daughter was safe. Dad. Lily's voice was thoughtful. Remember when you said sometimes the hardest battles aren't the ones we fight with weapons? I remember. Is that what you did? Fight a different kind of battle? Henry reached over and squeezed her hand. Everything I did was to protect you. Sometimes protecting the people we love means making hard choices. Like chess. Lily smiled slightly. Mr. Cooper says sometimes you have to sacrifice pieces to win the game. Something like that. But you weren't a piece to be sacrificed, sweetheart. You were the one I was fighting to protect. They drove on as the sun painted the sky in shades of promise. Ahead lay San Diego, new opportunities, a chance to heal. Behind them, in a prison cell, Maya was learning the true cost of her choices. Can we get a house near the beach? Lily asked, her voice full of hope for the first time in months. We can look. Henry smiled. Maybe one with a big yard, room for a garden. And no more bad memories? No more bad memories, Henry promised. Just new ones, better ones. The highway stretched before them, leading away from the shadows and into the light. Sometimes, Henry knew, the darkest actions led to the brightest futures. And as he drove toward their new life, with his daughter safe beside him, he knew he would never regret any of in combat. He learned that victory sometimes required difficult choices. But protecting his child? That had been the easiest choice of all.